Hi there. This is Tyrant, and I'm joined by Tyrant and Tyrant for a podcast on Guilty Gear Strive. How are you doing, Tyrant?
I've died and gone into the Shadow Realm, but other than that, I'm doing fantastic.
Good to hear it, Shadow Tyrant. Commentary Tyrant, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I just want to announce I secretly prefer Guilty Gear to Dragon Ball Z.
Oh no, you've come to Shadow Realm too now.
I've got realms everywhere.
So, guys, the running joke is that everyone in the UK FGC is in fact Tyrant, but in fact, ta-da! Here we are. So, I'm very, very glad to be joined on Fighting Words 3 by the one and only Leon Massey and TheoryFighter. Guys,
that's true.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure. What a pleasure. Do you want to, I don't know, quickly introduce yourselves?
Yeah. Theory, you go first.
Nice, man. I'm TheoryFighter. I've been making content and playing fighting games for a good part of a decade now. Started out with ST back in like 2008. Mainly Street Fighter player for most of my time playing fighting games, and then around the release of Street Fighter 5, I kind of bounced off that game and went like neck deep into Guilty Gear and made a bunch of guides with C4IQ, started running tournaments, doing a lot of house sessions and getting a lot of noise complaints. And I've just been kind of sticking out with Guilty Gear and, dabbling in boomer games in the process.
Nice. I see you're a big fan of not Tekken cross Street Fighter cross Tekken as well.
Yeah. During the sort of like latter stage of Street Fighter 4, there was a lot of London players that played cross Tekken. So me and C4 again started running tournaments at the Heart of Gaming when it was still a thing. And yeah, it was great. We just ran that game for a long time and it was really fun. Despite everyone really disliking it, we had a great time with it.
Yeah, I also thought it was quite underrated. But yeah, if anyone hasn't checked out TheoryFighter's channel, please do so immediately. He makes really, really excellent videos. I can't recommend them enough.
Thank you kindly.
Not at all.
Cheers.
Not at all. And we also have the one and only Leon Massey with us today.
It is me. So for people that don't know, I'm a Smash person turned FGC person. So I played Melee for 4 years from like 2015 to 2019. And then I got into like Guilty Gear and Street Fighter around like 2016, 2017 kind of time. And so I've been playing fighting games for a while, although I have a very different origin story to everyone else. I'm more of like a newcomer in the boomer sense. Not to call you boomers, but you are boomers.
I'm completely a boomer. I'm ripe. I'm at the ripe old age of 34. We'll be 35 this year, so I'm halfway to 40. I really should be growing up and stop doing these these fighting games and whatnot.
Fighting games.
But yeah, it's interesting that TheoryFighter, you come from, I guess, mainly a Street Fighter oriented background, and Leon, you come from a Smash and Guilty Gear background, but you're both like predominantly Guilty Gear players now. And I like my first competitive fighting game was actually Third Strike. That's how I kind of cut my teeth and learned how to play fighting games with CVS2. But the first game I really took seriously and I really wanted to just learn it was Third Strike. And when Third Strike was kind of at its boom in the arcades, Tekken 5 came out. And that hooked me, and then I've been known as kind of more of a Tekken head ever since, but I've always dabbled in a wide variety of other fighting games, including Guilty Gear. I mean, I remember when the first Guilty Gear came out in 1998, I was drawn to it because I just loved the crazy, quirky character designs and just the soundtrack and the general aesthetic. I mean, Soul looked a bit like Cyber Ryu to me. It looked interesting. And then Guilty Gear X, I remember coming out on the Dreamcast, and that was at the time there was nothing else like it. It was just singular, unique. And
it was when Guilty Gear became good and found its own identity. Have you gone back and played Guilty Gear 1? Holy Jesus, it's something else. Oh my god.
Instant kills.
Yeah, you can combo into instant kills. I mean, Guilty Gear X Yeah, yeah. It's a massive kusoge. It's a massive, like, objectively, it's terrible fighting game, but you can see the seed of innovation that kind of still that still runs to Strive today.
It had a philosophy.
It did. They had, you could see the developers trying to say something with it. I'm not sure if you guys played Guilty Gear X or know much about like competitive Guilty Gear X, but that game I believe didn't have Tekken. So okizeme was really strong. So characters like Johnny just mauled you on wake up.
Did they not have burst in that one as well?
They didn't have burst either. No burst. Yeah, so okizeme was crazy good. And then they slowly, over the course of the XX games, Guilty Gear gained its kind of gameplay identity. They kind of, what started off as this innovator was sort of slowly hammered into, they started off as, Arxis started off as innovators, but over time they became craftsmen as well. Especially by the time like Accent Core plus R came out. But yeah, like we're here to talk about Strive. Guys, what were your general thoughts on Strive now that the open beta is over?
Do you want to take it, Leon?
Yeah, I guess I'll take it. So to not take up too much time, I thought it was good, but it definitely didn't hold everything I was looking for. When I see the words Guilty Gear, the game Strive wasn't exactly what I was looking for in Guilty Gear. It was still very fun. It was still very, very good. I think it's probably the best fighting game that's been released like in the last 2 years, although it hasn't really had much competition, to be completely honest. But it was very good, but it wasn't really what I was looking for in a Guilty Gear title. So I guess that's like a short, brief summary, and then it's like there's many complex reasons as to why that occurs. But that's generally how I feel. Good, not good in the ways that I wanted it to be.
Yeah. So good fighting game, but not good Guilty Gear. Is that kind of a way of like? Is that an awkward way of summarizing it, or is that accurately described?
It's an awkward way of summarizing it, but it wouldn't be a dishonest way of summarizing it. The way that I'd like think about it for anyone that's over the age of like 20, if anyone remembers the outrage that there was between Halo 3 to Halo Reach, it's kind of like that. It's like Halo Reach is still a very good game, but it's not the game that people were looking for when they were playing Halo 3 and looking at Halo Reach as kind of like the next Halo game. That's how I would kind of compare it.
Okay. So, okay, I get it. So you feel like the Guilty Gear Strive has lost a bit of its unique identity?
Yeah, to an extent. It's like it puts highlights and emphasis in different parts of gameplay, which is perfectly fine, but it's not the parts that I wanted it to be. They're not the parts that I wanted to be emphasized.
Okay, I hear. Theory, what were your general, in a nutshell, thoughts on Strive?
So I really enjoyed it. I think I'm somewhat, like Leon said, it raised the question of like, what is Guilty Gear? Which is always a really hard question to answer because it's kind of a personal one where it's like related to the character you play, your play style, things like that. But as someone that comes from a Street Fighter background, it's actually really common in pretty much every version of Street Fighter that the game is completely different, right? So I think coming into Strive, I had the same mentality that I had with Street Fighter, whereas I expect this to be a completely different game, share some similarities, share some qualities. And there are things like, how you manage risk and the defense mechanics. And those are the bits that were Guilty Gear to me. And so I came out of it really enjoying it. And I think also there was just this nice added bonus of seeing lots of people from lots of different fighting games who have never really crossed over. The Dragon Ball players and things like that. And everyone kind of came together behind this one title to play it, which was a really awesome thing to see just from the community perspective.
I hear. Yeah. It's really brought together a ton of different communities, which is great. Not least because the netcode, which we'll get into later, which I feel is a real game changer. I mean, my experience with Strive were, I'm the least dedicated of a Guilty Gear player out of the three of us, but I really, really enjoyed it. It was the most fun I've had with a new fighting game in I can't really remember how long. It felt, yes, it's simplified since XR. That was clear to see, but I felt a lot of those decisions were smart ones. Not entirely. I would say that clearly there were flaws with Strive, but the more important thing is that the foundation is in place there for this in time to be hammered into an absolutely terrific fighting game. Because I feel it's a bit unfair to compare Strive with XR version 5 or plus R version 7. But for the first revision of a fighting game which tries something new, and generally those first versions tend to suck because, you know, you're throwing all those ideas, you know, at the wall. I thought it was very impressive, and I can't wait for it to release, and I can't wait to see what it shapes up to in the future.
Yeah, I think also, like, quite notably, Arxis, their first versions of games are often pretty busted.
Yes.
You know, first versions of Blaz, even Sign. These are games that had a ton of problems at the start, you know. And it's kind of easy to look back at it and be like, oh, maybe they weren't that bad, but they were pretty bad. So seeing it from Strive's perspective, it's already off to a pretty decent start.
Yeah. When you compare it to like Rev 1 and stuff like that, it's like, it's a really polished game for an Arc System game on like the first release, especially. It's like within like the first like couple of hours of like the previous Arc System games, it's like you just find ridiculous, bonkers, just dumb shit, and just ways to kind of break down the system really quickly. Like I remember when Grand Blue came out, literally in the first day, they found like an option select that covered like most options, like in every situation. And so it's like, for that kind of situation to not occur this time is not only a breath of fresh air, but also a sign rather that they've kind of like knuckled down and they've really gone, okay, like what are the problems going to be and how can we work around this in ways that are still going to provide the player with a lot of freedom. And so I think for a first revision especially, it's fantastic.
It was quite a massive improvement from the closed beta that was about 9 months ago. I don't know if you managed to play that.
No, unfortunately, I was stuck on PC.
I mean, just in terms of general game flow, I remember they changed the air dash mechanics quite a bit. I mean, TheoryFighter, what do you think were the main changes from the closed beta until the open beta? Like, what were the main salient points?
They changed the air dashes a fair amount. I believe they removed this sort of like FD break on air dashes.
Yeah, you could change the trajectory of them by hitting a button earlier or later. Now they just go a set distance like they've always done. They were incredibly hard to anti-air in the first version. Like it was just impossible. It was just impossible.
Yeah, and there was a lot of like landing in like FD break and then land into a low. There was a lot of mix off it. And they also removed quite a bit of Oki from the game. So I believe, if I'm not misremembering, Kai had his stun dipper with hard knockdown, which it doesn't anymore, unless you're in Dev Trigger. So there was little bits like that. It seems like they removed a lot of that. They lowered the damage substantially. Yeah, it seems like a vastly different game to me. And they improved instant blocking, which I think was a massive complaint from people, that it didn't feel like it had a purpose outside of building a bit of extra meter when you walk forward. So yeah, they listened to a lot of community feedback, which was quite surprising, but also really good.
Yeah, they've been incredibly receptive to community feedback. I feel like not just for Arxis, but for a Japanese developer in general, they've kind of turned over a new leaf in engaging with a conversation, with a dialogue with their community. In so many ways, like of course the feedback that was adopted into the game, but also stuff like the starter guides, which I find is incredibly impressive. Like
definitely the way that they've kind of like communicated, it hasn't been like exceptionally direct in the same way that like, I don't know, like Riot Games is, where it's like they're going to tell you everything that's going on, they're going to explain everything and why it's happening. But they've at least made like massive leaps and bounds for a Japanese developer to at least like communicate and be like, here is what is happening,
Yes.
rather than just dropping something on us and going, well, what the fuck do we do with this?
Yeah.
So they've done a really good job with that. And I think that even if it wasn't to like progress too much further from this point, I would still be decently happy with what they're at least communicating to us for now.
Yeah. Like a perfect example of that are the in-game command lists, which are just incredible. Like each move is accompanied by a little movie, which shows you how the move is used and when it's supposed to be used, and a tight, succinct few sentences on like the utility of the move. And it just helped me personally so much in just like, this is how you play that character and this is how you use these tools. I just found it a really non-pandering way of reaching out to players and giving them a lifeline, basically. I'm kind of stunned that fighting games haven't thought to do something like this before. For me, especially coming from like a Tekken background where you go into the command list, it's 150 moves. Oh God, where do I start? What do I do? What is useful? Maybe this one, it's a 10-hit combo, looks damaging. Like, a bit of direction.
I think the Soul Calibur did something similar if I remember correctly, where they at least gave you like some brief explanations of exactly what you're supposed to be doing, but they didn't really. It was kind of like, if I remember correctly, and I could be remembering wrong, it was just like laid out in like a big paragraph, and it was like, it's not super approachable. Whereas the way that they've done it in Strive, where it's just like, it's very much applicable to what you're looking at. So you're only given the information that you really like want to see, rather than just being given the whole encyclopedia and going, you find it. So they've done really good with that.
Mortal Kombat did a similar thing. They had like frame data in there as well, which was really nice to see. I think the thing you touched upon about it being non-pandering is like quite an important thing as well. Like, especially in the guides which you highlighted in the video, I think one of the things that impressed me the most was the language they used. Was it conveyed enough depth, but it didn't just by default alienate anyone.
Exactly.
So you could explain the purpose of a move without using too much fighting game terminology to make it confusing, but also give the actual depth that was there that needed to be expressed.
Exactly.
It was really impressive.
I hope they intend to keep this up. Like, maybe they've done starter guides. Maybe in the future we can see intermediate guides, a few bread and butters, general overview, game plan, like, helping players graduate from starter or beginner to intermediate, maybe even advanced in a few years when the meta has sort of developed and solidified a bit.
That'd be nice.
No, it's really
It's
great.
one of those hard things with games in general, is like talking about the intermediate, and especially where intermediate play and like a character can become, like what you said at the start, can become quite irrelevant at the start, like a couple of months in, right? So if you look at trials in, say, like Marvel or Street Fighter, they often aren't optimal combos. That in part due to they're not trying to be optimal, but also the combos evolve and become more optimal and get more purpose over time. So it's difficult, I imagine, from a company perspective, when the meta affects so much of how we play characters, how we view them, what their game plans are. They don't want to release content that becomes out of date. If they're the official guide and they're talking about how Axel plays day one, well, it might not be relevant anymore.
Right. Games are constantly evolving. An interesting thing to see would be, in the lobbies, and we'll get to the lobby system later, but taking up the right third of the screen is the news section. And I thought that was entirely too big, but the fact that it existed at all is a good omen. I hope they plan on updating that with like tournament results and maybe potentially even highlighting content creators like Riot does, for example. Like, hey, check out this new Leon Massey video. I think it would just be a great bridge from players, or even entry-level players, into helping them get into the community. Having that definitely right there.
The thing that worries me a little bit about that is if they don't do anything with it, the way that Tekken doesn't do anything with their kind of news tab on the main menu, it will literally just be wasted space and be another thing for people to point at and go, wow, this lobby system's dog shit, which it is.
But it is. I I think that's the most objectively dogshit element of the whole game. I don't think anybody, like, has anybody said a single good word about the lobby system?
People have said good things about the way that the floor system works, but the lobby itself, no.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty funny, the lobby system. Having to give someone directions for games is awesome. Going like, oh yeah, I'll meet you in Park 5. Go past the stage, behind the Asda, I'm there with my sword out ready for something. It's just like the weirdest sort of thing to have to do over Discord, but it is terrible.
Leon and I had that experience. We tried to get a few games in. I'm in Park 34 in Japan by the stadium, and we try to have a match, and then Leon teleports to like the other side of the screen, and it's not
the teleport
functional.
was so bad. The fact that the lobby was so like delayed as well. It's like, I understand that it's a lobby. You don't want to have like too much network traffic going through that thing because it's supposed to be a dogshit server for like just getting to your peer-to-peer connection. But like, oh my God, it was so delayed. Like you'd have one player move and then 2 seconds the other one would move. It's just like, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to communicate? Find the games. It made me very angry.
And I think you mentioned this in your impressions video, but when you actually match up with someone, there's no indicator. There's no like sound. There's just a little like text box in like this tiny text box in the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, bottom left. Yeah, apparently on pad there was a rumble feature. However, I'm not playing on pad, and quite a lot of fighting game players aren't playing on pad. Obviously, on PlayStation 4, you can expect that most people will be playing on pad. But like when this comes out on PC, I would imagine that quite a lot of people are going to be playing on keyboard, and then when they stop playing on keyboard, they might go over to a mix box or a fight stick rather than necessarily going straight to a pad. And it's like, you've got to give us some kind of other indication there, like make it so that it's as informed as possible. It's just it was very strange.
Yeah.
I hope grumpy.
I hope they genuinely reconsider the whole thing. I mean, the fact they haven't until now suggests they won't. But like, even I found the arcade cabinet system in Xrd and Grand Blue Verse a bit long in the tooth and unnecessarily convoluted. I just like a menu. I like something functional and simple. Get me into the games, please, ASAP. But this lobby system was just like satirically bad. It almost seemed like a satire of just unnecessarily convoluted lobby systems.
Yeah, it was very dumb. And it's like, I would be fine if this was like a side option, but the fact that it's the primary way to find a match is the biggest problem for me. It's like, as a side, perfectly fine. It's why I'm fine with like player lobbies in Xrd, because even though they're not great, it's like they're good enough that even though they're the main version of like getting through, it's like it's just another layer, but it's not a complex. It's not a what's the word? Like a difficult layer to get through. Whereas this lobby system is like, there's just too much going on. Like, just cut it. Just gut the thing.
On the bright side, at least they added a quick match option.
True.
I mean, better than nothing, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, they need a rematch option. That's the main thing.
That is insane that they didn't have that. And I imagine that that was intentionally left out. At least I hope it was intentionally left out, just so they could stress test the lobby system a bit more.
I assume so, but it's one of those things where, like, everyone complained about the lobby in the closed beta at the start, and then it hasn't changed. And so I'm a little bit terrified that they might overlook something like a rematch button. So I'm just going to keep bringing it up till I get a guarantee. It's
slightly insane how many fighting games initially come out without a rematch option. I remember Street Fighter 5 didn't have that. Tekken 7's one was quite convoluted. It's just like, this is like, but if you play at all online for even 10 minutes, it's the first thing that you notice is missing. So it sort of boggles my mind. But hopefully it was just a stress test the system. This was a beta after all. But I guess on that point, let's move on to the netcode. And this is, I mean, going from something that everyone generally, everyone agrees that is objectively bad. Most people seem to agree that the netcode was objectively amazing. And just what were your personal experiences with it?
Netcode good.
Yeah. In a nutshell.
It was so good that it was like, I could look at the like ping numbers at the top and I could like stress about the rollback frame, but it's like realistically, I didn't notice that the netcode was there the majority of the time, which is what netcode should be. You should have as little gap to the point where you have to bring up the network environment that you're in. It's like, if I have to talk about how good this game's network is, it's because there's a problem with every other game's environment. And the fact that it was like, okay, we're all talking about how good this environment is because of how bad every other game is. So it's like, in a couple of months' time, and if people are playing this for the first time as their first fighting game, they're not going to mention it, which is a good thing, because it means that it's so good that it doesn't become a thought for them, which is how it should be, and it's how it always should have been.
I feel your frustration. I've grown many a gray hair because of delay-based netcode, and God, thank God it's finally here. Thank God, it's such a relief.
Yeah, and it's going to be opening like a big can of worms for like JP developers as well. Like if a mainstay title like this can include it, it's going to look almost embarrassing not to put it on your game. It's a massive deal. It is. Yeah, it works perfectly. It works exactly how you want. The literal only consideration I have is the fact that I haven't played the game that much offline, so it's kind of hard to actually feel the difference, you know. Like, I'm comparing online to online, which is not necessarily like a good comparison, but yeah, from what I could tell, I was able to play people in Russia and everywhere, like around the world, same way I can on Fightcade, which, you know, is all you want.
I remember in the Japan fighting game publishers roundtable, Arxis noted that the netcode was developed completely from scratch. It's not based on GGPO or anything. And the rumor mill is that one of the devs who worked on the KI netcode was also helping out. I don't know how much truth there is to that. I mean, a lot of people are saying it in the chat right now. A lot of people saying yes, rumor. Oh, Zinak. Yeah, it's true. Okay, apparently it's true.
It's true. Confirmed by Twitch chat, which, as we all know, should always be trusted. But yeah, I am pretty certain that that's true. Just by the amount that I've heard it kind of spun back over and over again, I'm going to assume that's true.
Yeah, and speaking of KI and MK11, I always held them to the gold standard in terms of netcode. I haven't actually admittedly played much Skullgirls or them fighting herds, which I hear also has amazing netcode. But I feel that from my experience, Strife might just be the best netcode out there. It was I felt a step beyond even MK11 and KI.
Yeah. The thing is, we are also comparing it, as Theory's already pointed out, online offline compared to online. Yeah. And so it's like, I think the moment that we do get offline in like however many months or years that will be, we'll really be able to see like just how good it is. But it's definitely, compared to everything that I've played online, it's still the best out of everything. There were a couple of games that were like, whoa, this is a bit rough. But it wasn't.
I know that, Leon. I know that. Yeah. Rollback dolphin, rollback whale. I might just be salty because
frame. Can't see it coming, can you?
I might just be salty here because Leon beat me in that first of three. But
I'm the Guilty Gear guy. Come on now. It would be a shame if I had lost.
It was a close one, though. It was a close one.
Yeah, it was good.
But yeah, it was.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, it did lack the functionality from Skullgirls and Fightcade to be able to set your own delay, which is fine. I understand it from a sort of like, not everyone's going to understand what setting your own manual delay means, but it is a useful thing to do because some people are just more willing to deal with more rollback than they are input delay. So it did miss that functionality, but I can see from a developer standpoint, you know, if you get someone that doesn't understand netcode or fighting games doing their own delay, like who knows what they're going to do with it.
Yeah. It's like back when Skullgirls was really popular, and it was really popular at one point because everyone on my Steam's friend list owns that game, and half of them aren't fighting game players. It's like you'd see that box come up and you'd go, I don't have a fucking clue what this means. And I didn't know what it meant for a good 4 years. And then somebody told me about rollback and how it works, and then it was like, oh, okay, I understand it now. And so for a console game, especially where you can't assume that the user base is going to be as like tech savvy or necessarily as ingrained as potential PC players, where you've got things like Plus R and Skullgirls that allows you to do these kind of things. I think it made sense for them to not make it a default, but I would like to see it as
a feature,
say like an option in like the option setting. It's like by default it's on automatic detection and it automatically assigns your rollback. But in future, if there was a way that you could make it so that before a match starts, you're allowed to set how many frames you want, even if it's just like 5 seconds extra on the kind of loading screen, I would enjoy that personally.
Oh yeah,
but it's good enough so far that I don't think it's a necessary feature.
Yeah, most rollbacks kind of gone through this renaissance where a bunch of old games have been updated with rollback netcode, and most of those have that option. So it remains to be seen. I hope it does become a feature. Just to go hone in on your personal experience with the netcode. I mean, I felt that 0 to 50 milliseconds felt basically perfect, but again, there's no baseline, there's no offline to compare it to. 50 to 100 was pretty damn good. 100 to 150 milliseconds was very, very playable. 150 to 200 is where you start seeing a little bit of rollback, but still better than, for example, me playing delay based against my my neighbor. And then I guess 200 plus is where you start seeing real effects in your gameplay. And that point you're talking about thousands of miles, not just cross country, but cross continents. And I feel that 250 milliseconds is really sort of the limit where you can stop calling it like playable or at least competitive.
Yeah, 100%. I think that once you get to about 150 plus, I'd say that's the point where the rollback becomes noticeable enough that I'm a little bit annoyed and I really wouldn't want to play in tournament for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the fact that you've still got 150 milliseconds before that, where it's amazing. Good enough. It's especially something that's quite important in Europe, where connections between countries fluctuates like a motherfucker. Even inside of England, if I want to play someone down the street and to Scotland, we're going to have entirely different like connections. Even though we're only a couple of 100 miles away, you kind of like forget how big the country is. And so, especially in Europe, where it's like networks are going to be entirely different, like broadband connections are going to be way different across the whole continent. That 0 to 150 limit is so important that they got that really, really down. And the fact that they've done good enough on that makes me pleased enough as it is. Because once you get to like 200, you kind of have to expect that there's going to be something going wrong.
Right.
Even in dedicated servers, it's like,
absolutely.
In dedicated servers, it's going to be fucked at that point. It doesn't matter how good the server infrastructure is. You've got that much distance that you kind of can't work with. And so the fact that they've made the 150 to 0 band so good is the bit that I consider important. Once you get to 250, I don't care how bad it is.
Yeah,
it's going to be bad.
Yeah. I feel like it's really going to open up Europe to East Coast tournaments and Japan, Korea to West Coast. Because I played a few people in California. It was pretty damn good. And I even had a very playable set against someone in the Midwest. And that's pretty far. I think the furthest game I had was with someone in Norway. And they were on Wi-Fi. And yeah, there was rollback. Japan to Norway, Wi-Fi. And it was still playable. So yeah, it's the netcode's pretty damn amazing. Game changer, if anything. So yeah, let's thank Sandwich Man and Giovanna for potentially saving the fighting game genre. Clap, clap, clap.
Thank you very much, American boys.
Thank you. You saved the world again. So let's move on to the Gatling system, because this is a really contentious point. And most people seem to not like it. And I just want to throw it out. Like, guys, what do you think about the Gatling system?
Theory, go first.
So I think it's safe to say it's fairly unintuitive to new players. Being able to say to someone, Yeah, just press punch, kick, slash, heavy, slash, dust in that order, and you'll get something. It's a pretty easy concept to explain. It's difficult as someone that's played Guilty Gear for a relatively long time. Going into Strive, it caused a lot of confusion to start out with, because you just expect a certain degree of flexibility from the game, which you don't really get. And that was a bit weird, but as time kind of progressed, I kind of stopped worrying about it that much. Like, because intuitive is super relative. You know, we talk about, you know, Tekken, or like a good example is, say, target combos in Street Fighter. You know, they're not intuitive, but people can learn them, and it's not really been an issue before. So the main thing that the Gatling system did, which was the most notable thing to me, was nerfing 2P and 5P. So 2P and 5P now you can't go into sweep, which is the main big deal. You have to go into one of your directional normals. I, unlike a lot of people, am a pretty big fan of this. So in Guilty Gear in general, you know, you can mash out, and I'm being reductive, but you can mash out a 2P, and then you would go into either your combo, or you go into sweep, and then you get Oki. And this is a pretty common thing that happens, right? And I like the idea that they are nerfing the ability to just go straight into Oki from a 2P. Because in other games, what they'll do is they'll lower the damage. And Guilty Gear does this as well, is they lower the damage you get from these light attacks if you go for a full combo. But because the Oki is strong in Guilty Gear, generally speaking, it doesn't matter that much, because you're going to get a decent setup from it. In Strive, you mash out 2P, and obviously it's early, so, you know, there's a caveat to this that people aren't frame trapping as much, but you mash out a 2P and 5P quite often. And I think this is in part due to the removal of YRC and FRC, providing relatively safe frame traps and pressure resets. So if we were getting Oki from 2P all of the time, I think the game could get quite scrambly. Like you'd see people scrambling for hits a little bit more, but instead what you get from it is like pressure. So maybe your soul, when you go 2P and 6P, and then you get a little bit of pressure, but not necessarily good Oki. Or you do 2P and then you mix up with throw, or, you know, one of your mixes. It doesn't start the Oki, it just starts pressure, which can lead to Oki. And I'm generally speaking a fan of that.
Okay,
I hear.
fair enough. That's a bit of a different perspective to what I've heard most people say. To be fair, I haven't really heard much people talk about the Gatling system, which is a little bit strange, because I know that the general consensus is most people aren't too pleased with the change, myself included. I personally don't like the way that it's changed, simply because when you're, or at least for me, at the very least, when I'm playing Guilty Gear, there's a lot of things where I'm thinking, this might kind of work, and it probably won't, but the game's going to let me, and so I'm going to do it. With the changes to the Gatling system, I feel like the game has kind of shut off my ability to kind of make them choices. And I don't know if that was for the kind of reasons that you've laid out, or the reason that they wanted to make it so that the player didn't have as many situations where they put themselves in a wrong point. But for me, it's more important that the player, myself included, kind of has more options to them, even if them options are wrong, rather than more options that lead to the correct outcome. And the kind of way that they've shut down the Gatling system to make it so that you can't do 2K into close slash and then jump cancel off of that close slash to then like try and do like an IAD mix up, even though it's entirely fake. And it's a bad mix up. The previous Guilty Gears would let me do that. And it's dumb and I shouldn't do it, but it at least gives me that learning opportunity and lets me feel like I have more choices. The new system makes me feel like I have more choices that lead to me getting what I want, but the fact that I don't have as many choices to make frustrates me a little bit. So maybe it's entirely like I'm a big baby and I want everything my way. But to me, it's not a positive change. Yeah.
I hear. I personally, I've gone through a sort of a 180 with my opinions on the Gatling, because I remember 9 months ago with the closed beta, I genuinely disliked it. I thought, punch, kick, slash, heavy slash, dust. What could be simpler than that? Anyone can pick it up, do a basic combo. And what are they trying to achieve with this? They're trying to make it more intuitive by making it less intuitive. And the more time I spent with Strive, I guess the more I felt I was trying to understand their design decisions. And now I've gone from being against it to neutral to I actually quite like the Gatling system. For the reason that you said, Leon, that you don't like it actually, because the wrong option is not on the table anymore. Because yes, you could do punch, kick, slash, heavy slash. It's a terrible option. Yeah, it has no use at even a competent level of play. So why should it be there? It just serves as a red herring, as an obstacle in the end for an entry level player trying to get into Strive. I feel that all the Gatling routes now have a purpose. They have a function. They are functional. And to me, that's just clearer game design.
Mm-hmm.
I feel just it's a bit easier to navigate into meaningful gameplay with Strive now. And at the very lowest level of play, it's less intuitive. But if you're actually looking to engage with Strive competitively, I think it's more intuitive, or at least less confusing.
I kind of get that. You kind of like clear up the amount of kind of fuzziness in the kind of way that the game is communicating with you to kind of make it so that you're more immediately going to be able to make the choices that you want, which is definitely a good point. And I guess I haven't really seen it that way. Still personally not a huge fan of it, but I can definitely see the kind of positives that kind of system makes when it comes to especially educating the player, because it doesn't let you make a decision that's kind of like poor and then let you repeat that situation over and over and over and over again, expecting it to like eventually work out. It's just like, this one just isn't on the table anymore. Just think about it less. It's kind of like it's like you're removing the overchoice element, which is a basic system where it's like, if you provide people with a shitload of choices, chances are they're going to make the wrong choice, even if they know the solution to problems. Most of the time, the more options you give them, the more likely they are to make the wrong choice. So I guess that makes quite a lot of sense in that by kind of restricting not necessarily the potential, but the amount of decision space that there is inside of that cancel system. You make it so that the player's more likely to achieve a goal that they want to achieve.
Exactly.
So I can see that.
And I want to differentiate between wrong options and situational options, because wrong options are the ones that have no utility at a competitive level of play. They're just fluff, designed fluff. Like, why are they even there? Situational options are quite different. Like a specific move, of course, for a specific situation. And I feel I don't like how they've watered those down on a character level. I don't like the reduced move lists, for example, but I do like the more focused mechanics, especially in terms of Gatlings. So I just want to differentiate those two.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm not concerned about, but I think lacks is, so Kai, I think, is a good example of this, is even if we remove the, lights going into, or punch kick going into slash, heavy slash, there was so much creativity in games like Plus R and Xrd around the slash and heavy slash and resetting his strings and his Gatlings into plus frames, which maybe leave you vulnerable, but that was the whole point. You make them hesitate. And it feels like the space for doing that has been reduced somewhat, because there's just a lot less visual noise you can provide the opponent to make them insta block wrong, or maybe like they're thinking you're going to reset and throw, but instead you frame trap. There feels like there's a less play to be had there. And although, like I said earlier, I'm a fan of nerfing things like 2P and 5P, because they're nerfed, when these tools are good for a character, they're immediately a very good character. And an example of this is Potemkin. So Potemkin has what is essentially ST Ken's render cancels and it's ridiculous because he has his 6K with the shoulder charge, which you can go to from a 2p or a 5p. And then he can carry cancel that into a special. So that means that Potemkin basically he can either pop buster you, he can frame trap with flick, he can let the 6K rock, then cancel it, or go into pop buster. And it's somewhat concerning to me that a character can be insanely good just off having a good 2p or a 5p. Whether that's something that they're consistent about and they like everyone loses that option of like getting good mix from it, which I would be totally fine with. But having one character that's got it better than everyone else makes him so much better than everyone. It's just a bit bizarre.
Yeah. And I also think there's something to be said about. I think the assumption is if you take away moves from a character, you neuter the identity. But sometimes I don't think that's always the case. Sometimes if you prune away at the fluff, like the core identity of that character shines through a bit. I mean, this is a much more general point than you're making, Theory. But there is a sort of a knee-jerk allergic reaction to the word simplify, especially when it comes to fighting games and the FGC. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if simplification is done in the right way, it can be beneficial to both the game and allowing a player to express themselves through that character.
Yeah, I definitely get that. And I guess that the one of the things about the change to the Gatling system is because they've kind of reduced the amount of potential that can come off of like the potential visual noise that you can throw at someone. It at the very least has made it so that characters will have more clearly defined strengths and weaknesses, which makes it easier to play and easier to play against at the very least. Whether or not them changes kind of that simplification is good or bad in the long run, it's obviously going to have to be like seen. I think that it's not a bad thing to have like changed the way that you can like cancel into situations to make it so the characters have more clearly defined, like this is what they're good at, this is what they're bad at kind of systems. Obviously in Potemkin's case, that strength where he utilizes the system at the moment is very fucking strong.
He needs looking at. Might need a look at.
And he's just a bit difficult at the moment. I'm hoping that in future we will kind of see that not necessarily toned down, but the solutions to that kind of problem become a bit more clear over time. And it's like, okay, this character's balanced to be really good at this situation, but actually it's like, you don't have to deal with this if you do X, Y, and Z. And so hopefully that's the case in the future. However, at the same time, games do kind of get figured out at like a really fast rate at the moment. And so I would have expected us to kind of find out if that was a solution by day 5, which the beta got extended, so it was 5 days. I would have hopefully expected that, and maybe it's going to like come out in the future, but I don't think that that's going to be the case for Potemkin specifically.
I think there's definitely a thing though where, you know, the first 5 days of a game, people are labbing their own character rather than defensive options as much. And I think, you know, we're going to get into it later, but like things like instant faultless defense
you made a great video on that.
Good. Thank you. But it's a really good option to stop people from pressuring you with 2Ps and 5Ps, and Potemkin in particular. It limits his options for command grabs and stuff like that. And kind of also touching on, you know, the defensive mechanics, there is a slight concern, which I don't know if it'll come true, but because of the limitations on these Gatlings, that it might become too easy to make the correct choice from a defensive standpoint. It's like, if Kai's string, I know it ends at this point and all he can do is cancel into a special. If I just IFB it like at this point, he can't really reset anything, so I'm gonna get out. That is a little concern. I'm not sure if that's the case because you can cancel into specials very, very late in this game from a normal. So maybe it won't be the case, but that is a looming concern for me.
I also felt when on the offensive, my pressure options felt a little bottlenecked and constrained. I felt like my only way of enforcing pressure was with jabs. Like that was my only plus on block attack. And I just wanted more single hit pressure, a bit more some more free form options. Like it felt like they were linked too heavily to the Gatlings.
Yeah, I can kind of, especially when that kind of feeling worries me in terms of the defensive options specifically. And then it's like when you mentioned the way that instant faultless defense can affect Kai's pressure, it's like, okay, players might find a way around that specific problem, but what if on the opposite side, it's not just instant faultless defense allows me to do this. What if there's this option select which allows me to cover every option that he has off of that situation? Yeah. And if the defensive options are too strong, which I don't think they are at the moment, then that might become something that gets exacerbated down the future, where it's like you're practicing, but you're practicing just option select after option select on defense, which to me wouldn't be too fun because it would kind of reduce some of the mind game of a fighting game and kind of make it more an understanding test, which I wouldn't consider a positive for most games.
I think there are some latent defensive option selects in Guilty Gear historically, though. So like the throw option selects and things like that, which have been in every Guilty Gear, I think are, we kind of find the option select and we find a tech against the option select. I mean, this is all very sort of like theory crafting because who knows, but
theory crafting.
Yeah. But it is hard to tell where the game's going to go direction wise. It's just less options often mean it's easier to make the correct decision defensively.
Yeah, that's true.
Also bear in mind that like I'm coming in with this perspective as a Tekken player, and I basically have PTSD bloat PTSD, right? Like Tekken is infamous for characters being stuffed with utterly useless moves at a competent level of play that serve to obstruct meaningful engagement at lower and intermediate levels. So I mean, I get we're all bringing our hang-ups, our scars, our fighting game scars coming into this.
I can definitely understand that. I think that Guilty Gear as a franchise historically has made it so that most moves have an application and have a decently clear purpose once you have kind of explored the move list. So I definitely wouldn't be worried about the kind of issue of this move's here and it's just kind of fucking here, the way that it is in Tekken. And I believe Virtua Fighter has that problem as well.
To a degree, it's more focused. It's a more focused game.
It's more focused.
It's also more of a dead game, but I do find it interesting that Kai loses his Greed Sever in the same game where they introduce rollback. Of course, they did. They didn't plan rollback from the start, but I think Kai.
They should have.
Yeah, they should have. They should have for sure. But it's did Greed Sever have any real application at like competent levels of play outside of like a massive low crush, a big risky low crush, or arsing into it on a big read or something?
I mean, he's definitely. Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, Greed Sever was really good.
Right. I thought it's just like massively on. It's like the snake edge of Guilty Gear. That was always my.
It's the snake edge, but it's also inside of a game where the block pressure can be so like daunting to kind of push back against sometimes with a very active, like in order to take your turn back in Guilty Gear, it's like it's safer most of the time to try and incrementally break down their defense instead of going, fuck, I'm going to 6p here and I'm going to stuff out a Greed Sever. Like, So it had applications, and it varied depending on the way that your opponent had conditioned you into blocking, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's a move that's like, when you look at it by itself, you go, well, this is a low crush that does really high damage in the corner. But then when you look at it in the wider context of like how aggressive Kai can be, and you've got the blender on top of you, and he's thrown you like 20 times, it's pretty powerful. And there's a player called Shaden who uses it nonstop, and everyone hates it because it always works. It's just how it goes sometimes.
Unblockable online as well, by the way. You can't do it. You just can't do it. You're in 6 frames of lag. I was just like, how am I supposed to?
Yep. Yeah. I actually wondered if they removed that initially for that reason, but then
it was the Unga Bunga Kai move. Like, it's the only part of Kai that I hear people be like, this fucking character's stupid. Until that point, it's like, this character's got no source, and then it's a different complaint the moment Greed Sever comes out. It's like, what the fuck? But yeah. But
yeah, just to I guess round up on Gatlings. I think we all have quite different. We're either kind of mixed, or I'm for it. In theory, you're quite mixed on it, I feel.
Yeah.
And Leon, you're quite against it in general.
I'm like leaning towards against it. I'm a bit mixed. It's more, I'll have to see how it works in the future.
In the mess.
And it might come out that it's like, oh, okay, I think it's fine this way, especially inside of the game's like system changes. But just looking at it by itself, I'm against it.
Yeah, I'm. That's an interesting spread of opinions, and I think the chat is saying that all those opinions, like, oh, it was like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, I agree with you, and I agree with you. So I think that it's an interesting design choice at the very least.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the RC system, the Roman cancel system, and how it has changed from XR'd, which was again changed since XX. Right now we have red, blue, purple, yellow. Did I miss anything there?
Yeah.
Red is your standard like cancel on hit or block stun for more combos or more pressure. I believe blue is your mix-up one.
Blue's in neutral.
Yeah, in neutral. And you use it generally to enforce a very powerful mix-up on the opponent. Purple is the one you use to shorten your recovery or cut your recovery, basically. And yellow is the defensive one. So if you're on the receiving end of a block string, you tap RC, and then they just kind of, put their hands up, and it allows you to disengage. And they all cost 50%.
Yeah.
So there's no 25% yellow RC like in XR'd.
Yeah. Like an XR'd.
Yeah. So
and there's also no force break. I just want to point that out as well. Is it force break? The one FRC. So there's no way to like immediately cancel a move and just act immediately after it.
Yeah.
You can still cancel a move, but there's no way to do it with 25% with a specific timing and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. Which makes the game very, very different.
Yeah. And just to finally add on the changes, if the opponent is in hit stun with the RC or on a red RC, they kind of float up. They go into this like arc. Which allows you to land combos more consistently or easily. At least that's the intention. And finally, you can actually dash into your RC by up, down, left, right. I mean, I think there's a specific name for that.
Cardinal directions.
Cardinal, yeah. Okay, yeah.
But
drift RC, that's what it's called. And again, it's I think it's designed to help enforce more ambiguous mix-ups and or help you land combos more consistently. So, guys, what are your all right, well, somebody also pointed out that yellow RCs can't be used against guard crush moves like Sol's Fafnir. So
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Just got educated.
Yeah. There is one other thing to just like briefly just to encapsulate the whole of the RC system is you can also cancel out of your RC. So if you are like do a red RC, for example, you have the option for it to hit them and they'll float up slowly in the air, or you can just go immediately into a button or a special, and that will get rid of the float effect. But, yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's, I guess that's a summary of how the RC has changed on a mechanical level. So, guys, what are your thoughts?
Leon, go for it.
Okay, cool. I think it's sick. I think it's so good.
Yeah, me too.
I really like Xard's RC system, if I'm being totally honest. It's entirely flawed. It's so flawed. YRC is fucking stupid. It's dumb. But I'm also a Venom player, and so I'm naturally going to like it because it makes my character real fucking easy. But this system's like so much clearer in like what each RC does. I mentioned this in the little video that I did, but it's like now if I Roman cancel, I immediately know what is happening and why it's happening and what its purpose is. The RC system, both in Xrd and kind of to an extent XX, it's like you would do a Roman cancel and it wasn't really entirely clear what its purpose was. In XX, it was clearer because Roman cancels are a bit more simplified. But it's like if you're doing an RC in Xrd and you haven't looked at specifically what every single RC does, you don't really know what the difference between a red and a Y and a red and a purple RC is. It's like there's not very clear what the difference is. YRC is pretty clear in that you have like less meter burnt, but other than that, it's not too obvious what the differences are. Whereas this game, it's very immediate. Like YRC, he got blown back. It's like a dead angle almost. The RRC, it's like, oh shit, he's up in the air now, and also like I've immediately cancelled. Purple RC is like, oh okay, I ended this shit. It's like it's very immediately understandable. Also, the changes that they made to RC and that you can't just pop it in neutral and now you've got like a time slow and now you're just on someone is so much better. Just being able to sting a YRC from full screen and being like, it's my turn now, motherfucker. It's like, that's not fair and that's not fun to play against. So for as much as that makes me very angry because I loved winning games for free, it's much better for the system. I think it's way better. I think it's so much better. The only issue that I do have is the fact that we weren't given a new 25% option to go along with it, which at the time I wasn't too bothered about. But as I'm thinking about it more and more and more, it's like it doesn't make the meter as interesting in that it's like there's not as many interesting decisions to make with your bar up until you reach the 50% point. Whereas in Xrd and in XX, it's like you get 25 meter, which is very quick. You immediately have a choice and something that you can think about. You don't necessarily have to make that choice, but you can make that choice and play into that decision if you want to. In Strive at the moment, it feels like you don't gain that interesting decision as frequently as I would like because of the lack of the 25% option. But the RCs by themselves, I think they're very good.
Yeah.
Terry,
I completely agree with you. It's the most interesting part of the game for sure. I think so much of characters' creativity comes from RC, and where we were seeing later in the beta where people were using jump cancel or dash cancel into blue RC to slow them down.
That's really in development time, I think.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I find the whole slowdown aspect of blue RC where it will slow the opponent and give you more hits done so you can do like a 5D into an actual combo without, charging it. Like that's so interesting to me. It's such an exciting idea. And it gives a lot of the drift as well, gives a lot more movement options. As a pot player, being able to, mega fist drift forward and then pot buster someone feels amazing. Like it's so much fun. It's my favorite inclusion. I do agree with Leon though, like some characters build meter pretty slowly in this game, and trying to get to 50% if you're FDing certain things can be pretty difficult to do. And it means that you're just not really experiencing the RC that much. And I think this is for various reasons. Like the damage is really high in this game. If you could just start like a lot of mechanics, like if you had like a YRC or FRC equivalent, the damage would get even higher, which I'm sure they want to avoid. But I do agree, it does sometimes feel like the coolest bit of this game is only happening like twice a round, which is a bit of a shame.
I hear you. And I guess there might be a way of indirectly incentivizing people to, do the wall break, because that gives you a ton of meter. That gives you a ton of meter.
Yeah. The only issue I've got with that, and I think, do we talk about wall break later on? Yeah, we do.
We'll go on to wall break fully later on, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll go on to it a little bit later. But because of the way that wall break works in relation to damage, means that most of the time you only ever get like one extra RC out of it. But by that point, if you've got someone to the wall, if you've got someone to the wall and you've broken the wall, chances are you've probably already got that bar to burn.
Yeah,
and so it's like, unless you use that bar specifically to get to the point where you break the wall, then you'll get like the extra meter for another RC. But at the moment, it feels like you don't gain enough meter off of the wall. That's a bit of a strange statement to make, because you gain a shitload of meter off the wall.
You get a lot.
But you don't,
I think
like...
it's character specific. Sorry. Go on. I was just going to say that I think it's really character specific. Like Giovanna builds meter so quickly. And
offensive characters in general.
Yeah, and she can just, because she's not got a run, she's got a dash, it seems to build quite a lot quicker. And after a knockdown wall break, and I believe this is the case, if you wall break with a super, you actually get a turn.
And you get they get hard knockdown. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just sprint at them and do one block string, and often that will build you a 50% bar, which is pretty crazy, like in terms of momentum.
That's the one I want to get at, momentum. I feel like whenever I broke the wall, both in terms of the damage I just, I laid on the opponent and the massive meter gain, felt like a real momentum shift in my favor, which I'm quite for, actually. It really feels like they're on the ropes once you break the wall. Like, it's something you really want to avoid, which kind of makes sense, because I was always saying before, like 9 months ago especially, like, no competent player is going to want to give up corner pressure in favor of damage and some meter gain. But I guess it depends on how much damage and how much meter gain.
And especially when it's like the super breaks the wall and still gives you a turn afterwards. It's like, if you don't already have a huge amount of okizeme options that are like really diverse, it's like, so long as you've still got your turn, you've still kind of got like a pretty decent advantage, and you gain enough to offset the disadvantage of not having Oki. Or as strong Oki, rather.
I thought it helped give rounds a bit of a sense of like a stronger sense of a dynamic, like you're really on the ropes now, which I enjoyed. Like, I will say this about, I mean, I agree pretty much entirely with you guys on the RC system. I will say, regarding blue RCs, a lot of people kind of criticize Strive for not being too mix-up intensive. At least regards to XR, and I understand that, but I feel like there's been a very intentional design choice to link mix-ups, or at least safe and or effective mix-ups, to meter. So and like, for example, your high-lows are either unsafe or not very ambiguous or not very rewarding. But then when you have that blue RC, holy shit, I mean, some of the mix-ups that people were figuring out were like pretty degenerate. And this is just in the first 3 days, and this is something that's only going to develop over time. So I think, and considering how much damage one single opening can do in this game, I think it's not the... I think mix-ups are going to be a much bigger part of Strive as the meta develops, but we'll see what the counterplay is to that with Faultless defense and so on.
That's definitely true.
I was wondering what you guys thought about yellow RC as a defensive option, because it seems quite strong to me. A little bit harder to bait, it feels like, than, say, dead angle. I know in certain matchups it seemed a bit ridiculous, like it versus Zato, it was really good. So you just do it and it just basically gets rid of Eddie, and you're just like, which seems like quite a wild thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
The counterplay to it is obviously like the least developed bit of the game right now, but it seemed like a strong defensive tool for sure, to me at least.
Yeah, I think the YRC, the new YRC, it definitely felt a bit strong, and it felt like at least me and the people that I was playing against weren't really utilizing it as much. But I think that in future, either we're going to see it like utilized a lot, and it's going to be really strong at breaking down offense, or it's going to kind of end up like it's going to end up a little bit redundant as the game goes on. But the fact that we haven't had enough time to really like lab out the second portion of that makes it so that like we have no idea how this second bit of the future is going to go. So for as much as YRC right now might seem like it's like, whoa, shit, this is pretty fucking big, especially in the Zato matchup. I feel like it's too unexplored to really have like, for me at the very least, to have like a proper opinion of it.
Is it possible to YRC in retaliation to a blue RC? Because I feel that might be the counterplay. Because I feel that as the game develops, some blue RCs are just going to be completely ambiguous, left, right, high, low, 50-50s. Like even with friggin' Kai, I was figuring out from his 5K jump cancel some really ambiguous mix-ups from that. And that might just be the counterplay. Like,
I believe it is the counterplay.
Yeah.
No idea. Didn't test it once.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I guess that's something to be seen. But yeah, I think we're all quite on board with the RC system. Like meter is one of the most, has always been the way you use meter in Guilty Gear's been one of the defining elements of it. It's so freeform and interesting. So hurrah, strive, keeping that spirit alive.
It's like Guilty Gear isn't a game that I immediately think of and go, the meter is why it's interesting. But like when I really like think about why I like Guilty Gear, a lot of the time it comes down to what you can do with that meter. I think that the new RC system is really, really engaging. And so big thumbs up from me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you made a whole video about it, Leon, about meters, systems, and how they affect fighting games and whatnot.
Yes, sir. Don't watch that video. I mean, do watch that video, but don't watch that video at the same time. The audio is all over the place.
It's a very good video. I'd highly, highly recommend it.
Thumbs up is the best part.
All right, thumbs all up. So let's, I guess, move on to a more contentious point again. And I feel like opinions on this are either negative or mixed. The air dashes. And we're going to get to the whole like aerial segment of Strive now.
Yeah, we can just shove all of this bit into just air.
Like, air dashes, anti-airs, removal of air tech, chicken blocking. That's like how strong chicken blocking is. Just all of it. Like air. Let's talk about air in Strive.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
All right. So I guess where do we want to start with like air dashes? I know, Leon, you're not a fan of like how they feel.
Yeah, I've got quite a few problems with them. And when I think about it more, like the way that anti-airs work and the way that air teching works, it's all part of a combined problem in that it's not super. The air game in this game doesn't feel like it's. How do I explain this? As a casual user for game feel, air dashes feel bad. As a competitor, when it comes to anti-airs, it doesn't feel rewarding enough when you get an anti-air. Yeah. And the removal of air teching makes it feel like when you get hit off of like an aerial interaction, there's nothing to think about after that point, which I don't like too much. Which altogether makes me come to a kind of like, I don't really like the way that you hold up forward in this game. But I think the only one that I'm really like, well, I guess the only two that I'm really like super I don't like is air dashes feel like doo-doo and anti-airs just don't reward you enough. I think that anti-airs like being a rewarding factor is something that can be balanced and changed quite easily. The air dashes, I feel like they just, you would have to gut the system you would have to change the system to the way that previously worked for me to be happy. Did anyone else feel like the change to air dashes benefited the game in any way?
I was fairly ambivalent, I will say this. And I thought, because in the initial version, the closed beta, you could change the trajectory of the air dash. Like, if you press the button early, you'd land more quickly. If you press it late, you'd land later. And that made them really hard to anti-air. Now they go a set distance, and they're just a bit slower, and you see that sort of Devil May Cry style... What is it
circle
called?
Pads thing.
The Marvel Trish.
Yeah, exactly. The Marvel Trish thing.
The
What is the move called in Devil May Cry? Glyph?
I've never played DMC in my life.
Is it a glyph? Anyway, it feels like a DMC dash, but like air hike. That's it, air hike. But I felt like, okay, so air dashes are just objectively slower now, and I think that contributes to the identity of Strive being a more neutral focused game, more so than Xrd. I think that was the intention anyway. So they make, I think the idea was to make dash-ins a bit easier to anti-air, but the anti-airs themselves are so underwhelming, both in their hitboxes and the reward they give. Not always a hitbox. The hitboxes are all over the place. Some characters they can anti you easy as pie. Other characters really struggle. It's quite inconsistent in that level. But in that regard, yeah. But yeah, I don't know what to make of the air dashes, because I feel like the game hasn't been fully tuned around it yet. We're still in that kind of... The game is still not even finished yet. But I guess I'm sort of ambivalent, and they probably don't feel as good, but if they contribute to the unique feel of Strive, which is making it a more ground-based, was anything but in the beta, to be frank, but a more ground-based neutral game, I'm for that. Sorry, Theory, I kind of interrupted you a few minutes ago.
No, not at all. I have probably the unpopular opinion of air dashes in this game. I'm not like for them. I think I agree with both of you. The mouthfeel on air dashes is dog shit. Like it feels bad to air dash in this game. I think that's just straight up true. There's it kind of counter to what you said. I think the game has been balanced around these air dashes. So now air dashes, you can cancel jump normals into air dash, which you couldn't do before, right? You would have to double jump cancel, then air dash, which slowed things down massively and messed with the height. In this game, because you can air dash cancel your normals, if you didn't have that glyph, some shit would just be unreactable. Like, can you imagine dealing with Millia doing, blue RC, float forward, overhead, air dash cancel, overhead, air dash cancel, overhead? Like, how do you deal with that without the glyph? Like, you probably don't. You probably lose. Not that necessarily is like by default a bad thing, but like, I think it's a consideration. And I personally love the fact that you can air dash cancel normals.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think it's where pretty much all the interesting combo conversions comes from. Without it, I think combos would be the most dull they've ever looked in a Guilty Gear. But seeing, Soul convert like an entire corner to corner combo is the sickest shit. It's all in the air. I think it looks great. In regards to anti-airs, there was a big discrepancy between good anti-airs and bad anti-airs. And
that's the part where I felt it needs to be more fleshed out. Like, it's clearly still
and I think there always has been in Guilty Gear, there always has been a big difference, but it felt more evident here, like Milia's close S, Soul's 5K, obviously the God button. When a character has a good anti-air, it's just ridiculous how much utility they get out of it. There's an interesting discussion to be had about blocking anti-airs without spending FD. The thing it does, which I think people didn't appreciate in the beta, was it cranked your RISC really high. And it meant that if they air dashed at you again and you hit them, you're probably getting a counter hit. So that meant that you'd get a full combo. and they couldn't act if they blocked the anti-air, the 6p. They couldn't act until they hit the ground. So, and they flew back. So you got screen control, you sometimes got pressure, and you got the ability to maybe counter hit them. And it felt like the reward came later rather than earlier. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It feels a bit weird in Guilty Gear, to be honest, where you expect quite a good reward for an anti-air. Whereas here it's like, you don't get a reward until you get a counter hit for a lot of characters, which I'm not massively a fan of. And it also, because anti-airing became kind of a passive reaction, you didn't have to like think about anti-airing all of the time, which you kind of do in Guilty Gear traditionally. It took away emphasis from like moves that cover the ground and the air. So Faust 5K was a classic example of this, or Slayer 6H. Like these were moves that covered the air and the ground. So you'd throw them out quite a lot to cover multiple options, but because you don't need to do that as much, it allowed moves to be a little bit more focused, you know, which I'm not sure I like. I'm kind of ambivalent towards it, but it's an interesting direction change, I think.
I guess I wasn't really looking at it from that perspective. It was more like, my head ass is gone. What the fuck happened? It's I guess I was struggling to let go of the way that I wanted it to be and kind of see the potential positives or negatives of the way that it is now. Which I feel like for a lot of the Guilty Gear players that are very much like, I really like the way that X, Y, or Z game in the franchise works, are probably looking at it as I want more of this. Which I think is understandable. If it's a game in the franchise, then you want more of what you already like. But also at the same time, you bring up a good point in that it brings new changes to the table that we should see how they independently have positive qualities too. Yeah,
I feel that like the reward you get from a 6p in particular can be very hit or miss depending on a character. And what they should just do is just make it jump cancelable against airborne opponents, so everyone can just pop up, like especially on counter, so you can just jump up and do an easy combo, whoever your character is. Maybe it would homogenize the cast to an extent, but then they can just tinker around with the 6p hitboxes to decide who gets the stronger or weaker anti-airs respectively. I mean, I understand why they shouldn't do that on grounded opponents who are blocking, because jump cancelable normals, generally you can't cancel into them, and that's clearly a conscious design choice. But yeah, I see no reason why if you counter an airborne opponent with 6p, you can't just convert off of it.
I can kind of see it in the sense that if they wanted to make it so the characters have more clear identity and clear game plans, then they would want to like neuter certain characters' ability to anti-air. And so it's like, okay, we want you to be able to control this portion of the ground, like this portion of the screen and space with like this very strong oppressive nature. But then if somebody works their way past that point and is into the airspace that's like just above you, you don't get rewarded for playing into that situation, because the point that you wanted to be playing into was like further back in the game plan. And so I can understand why they would still want to do that. I just don't necessarily think that it's that fun. Which maybe as it's early days, it's like the fun is more valued at the moment, but later down the line, when we're going to tournaments and we're like putting money on the line, we'll value the kind of like ways that the system affects the meta. So it might be a system that maybe isn't as entertaining right now, but then when there are stakes, it will be more engaging. So I reckon it's still got room to kind of like flesh itself out and become clearly positive or clearly mixed, depending on the character you play, or clearly negative.
Like it's interesting you brought up chicken blocking and how like a lot of people didn't notice how much it cranked your risk, because I was chicken blocking. The more I felt like the more I played Strive, the less time my feet stayed on the air, because chicken blocking is both a very strong defensive tool. I mean, you can jumping up back is very strong at nullifying pressure, and it's also a good approach tool. You just air dash in and chicken block. But I think that raises a point that, man, it's actually hard to see your risk. It's a very important part.
That's a good point.
It's a very important part of Strive, perhaps more important than ever, managing your risk, especially with how high the damage is and how quickly it can build. But I just couldn't see the damn thing. And this is entirely a UI flaw.
Yeah. I massively agree with that. Yeah. The UI in general was questionable.
It's improved a bit, I guess. At least the portraits, the character portraits don't move along with the life bar, and they made some other changes to it. But I reckon that would be like the main portion that I would want to change, in that, like, as much as I don't like the visuals aesthetically, the visual clarity in certain portions of the match when it came to the UI was a little bit all over the place. Obviously, they made the beat counter too obvious to see. I still don't like that. But when it comes to risk, it's like that is a very important part. And if they're going to make it so that there's certain options, or the way that the game plays makes it so that builds quite quickly, ice cream. I want some ice cream.
Yeah. Then they should make that a bit more apparent. So yeah, I agree. The risk just needs to be fucking. I need to be able to see it more.
Yeah.
So if you are like, if you're someone that doesn't even know to look for risk, you would not. It just wouldn't be apparent to you that is a thing. Like, and it's one of the most important mechanics in the game.
Yeah.
So why would you not just jump forward at someone and you don't realize you got a full risk bar, and then pot hits you once and you lose?
Yeah.
It's a massive deal.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. On the topic of the counter slowdown, what are your thoughts on that?
I think good. I know that that's not necessarily the.
I was expecting that, but
take.
Yeah. I'm half with you, because I think it actually adds a lot to Strive's kind of identity and impact. The feels feel meaty and crunchy and counter.
That wasn't even the point that I was going to make, but that is definitely true. Mine is more. In the previous Guilty Gears, it's like counter hit combos can be quite important for some characters. Or like knowing when you've got that counter hit can be very useful. Whereas, but in XR, sometimes you didn't see it unless you were really trained to see it.
Yeah.
Whereas in this game, if you get a counter hit, the game tells you that you've got a counter hit, and it really makes you know that shit.
Yes.
So now I think that like counter hit combos at a lower level of play and at like the more intermediate level of play will be a bit more clearly capitalized on, rather than you're kind of like scrambling and you're going, oh shit, actually I've got quite a lot of risk here. I guess I can do this. So I think it's actually quite good. Whether or not it sticks around for the length of time that it should is a bit too much in my opinion, and it could have been communicated in different ways that would have been a bit less intrusive. But I still think that it's quite good.
Yeah. I actually agree with that. Yeah. Theory, what are your thoughts?
I'm gonna like paraphrase something C4IQ said to me about this, which was, if I counter hit you, I want your mum to know you fucked up. Like everyone in a 2-mile radius should know that you are shit at the game and you got counter hit for mashing. And I can't lie, I agree with that. Like I think it's counter hits in, and we talked about this a little bit before we started, which is things like Pole Bunker from Slayer. When someone gets hit by it, it is the most satisfying thing in the world.
Oh yeah.
And seeing that counter behind them as you clap them with like a pot 2H, it's awesome. Like you know someone's about to like die, and that's I think that's great.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm a huge fan. I understand it has certain ramifications on the pacing of the game and like the ease of hit confirming as well.
Yeah.
But it is so important, like getting counter hits, and it should be something that's massively highlighted.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm down for it.
Yeah. I agree. I'm with you in terms of, the clarity it brings. and the visual impact. My one issue with it is I just think it happens with too many moves. It happens a bit too regularly because not every move results in a counter state, for example. And there are some situations where, for example, I jumped in with an aerial heavy and counter, and then I tried to go into my kind of standard block string, and because the slowdown ate up my inputs, I just kind of stood there like, I didn't get anything off of that. That was slightly awkward. I feel like they could re-examine how many moves and how often that happens, because it feels great when it does, but when it's happening literally like some rounds just counter, it's a bit, I think it diminishes the impact and it's just frustrating to deal with at that point.
Yeah. I think the way that Tekken did it was actually really good. It's just like the camera like really comes in and then it comes back out again. And it's a clear enough visual that like, if you understand what that means, you immediately are able to react off of it. Whereas the way that it works at the moment, the fact that it slows down the game so much kind of can just eat at inputs. And it's just like, fuck's sake, YRC all over again.
Yeah, I was testing to see if there were any unique option selects that could take advantage of that. For example, if you could buffer out a special that would come out on normal hits, but wouldn't come out with a counter hit, which allowed you to confirm into more damage or something. I tried experimenting around with that, and I thought you could, but I guess I was just imagining it because when I tried it again later, it wasn't possible. But yeah, that's counter. I guess we've gone through quite a few topics now. One thing I wanted to add actually is the throw system. It's changed quite radically. And initially I found it quite counterintuitive. I mean, just to go over the changes, throws aren't 1 frame anymore. They're 3 frames, I believe. And to execute them, you do 60 or 40.
60 or 40,
Yeah. And I found that really weird and awkward at first. But throws are a very important part of the game. They're very powerful. They do a lick of damage. And yeah, what were your thoughts on that?
I'll let TheoryFighter go first because I don't have very complex thoughts on it.
I don't have complex thoughts on it either. The fact it kind of removed things like FD break into throw, which is like something, I don't know. I really like FD break. I think it's interesting and it's kind of cool, and it feels something that is very Guilty Gear, for lack of a better word. I kind of wasn't a big fan of that. The removal of throw option selects, I think, is the big deal here, right? Yeah. Throw's now having a whiff animation.
And I do like that. I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, I even though I was never against throw option selects, it's still something that's really hard to explain to people that don't play fighting games a lot. Like, oh yeah, you should press, P with this so you get your anti-air and your throw. It's like, what do you mean? And also getting thrown on your wake up because throws are 1 frame. That's another thing that can be kind of hard to explain to people. I understand these changes. I'm not immediately drawn to them as like good changes, but I can absolutely see from the point of like clarity for a new player why you would.
Yeah,
make it the way it is.
I found it very odd that actually throws beat DPs, at least Sol and Kai's. I believe Leo's charge DP still beats throws, and I wonder if that's because it's a charge move or it's an oversight. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about that, but given, for example, how like with Kai, you can if you RC his DP on block, he gets a mix-up, which is somewhat preposterous. I would prefer they just remove that and just made DPs function as they do in every other game. But these are niggles. These are little niggles. I'm overall for having throws having whiff animations. Somebody mentioned actually that throws feel a bit third strikey, and that's a weird impression I got from Strive in general. I'm not sure if you'll agree with me, but when playing Strive, I was reminded a lot of Third Strike in a really weird way, because they're both very kind of mid-ranged focused, very buttonsy games. They're both like the mid-range is a very important range here, which is why characters like Ramlethal are completely dominant at the moment, or at least very dominant. And hit confirms are super important and they're quite easy. But Also, they both encourage taking to the air. And, I mean, by Street Fighter standards, you can air parry, you can jump more in third strike than any other Street Fighter game. And in this, chicken blocking is very, very strong. So I felt they had kind of a similar game flow or a rhythm. Mid-range footsies focused, big buttons that also encourages aerial approaches. I'm not sure if you got that vibe.
I wouldn't say I got that vibe personally, but I can kind of see it, especially since you played like Kai. I played Dolphin Girl. I was in fucking SeaWorld. I was out there doing whatever the fuck I felt like. So I think that might be something that you kind of feel from character to character, especially because I played a character that, to me, out of most of the cast, felt quite guilty geary. Like I wanted dumb, easy Oki, and I wanted to break neutral for free. So if I don't get a YRC Stinger, I'm going to take a Dolphin. Like, one of the two. So personally speaking, it might depend based on the character you play.
Yeah, I played Kai, and honestly, the Kai Ramlethal matchup really gave me Ken Chun-Li vibes. It's like, how do I get near this character? Okay.
I definitely get that. How many questions have we got through?
We have gotten through, I guess we're at we've done the first 11, and I guess we're at number 12, which is the okizeme.
Yeah. Should we take a small break then?
I was just about to suggest that. Let's take like a 10-15 minute break, make some tea, and whatnot. And guys, I'll put some music on for you, and we'll be back shortly. Yeah. Well, where were we at? We were at
we
okizeme.
Just talked about counter hits.
Yeah, we talked about counter hits, and I guess we kind of went over the UI and the lobby as well. So there's not much to talk about on a mechanical point.
We can continue to shit on the lobby. I just want to point that out.
We can shit on it all day. We can make a whole podcast.
Everyone should be as vocal about how bad that lobby is. It's still the worst part of the game, and I'm terrified it's not going to be changed. Just saying.
They literally reversed it back to Xrd. I'm 100% happier. Even though Xrd is not perfect, anything's better than this.
It's Xrd with the floor system. It's pretty good. Actually, we can talk about that later. Instead of talking about lobbies, we could talk about the floor system because we've already kind of talked about the lobbies. But the floor system is like a unique approach to. Is a very, very unique approach to rank. Because obviously most games it's like you have one of two different kind of settings, or I guess three if you're talking outside of fighting games. You've got like a standard rank tier system, so the way that Tekken has it, where it's just like you've got first Dan to Omega Tekken God, is it now, I think? And you've got like and then you've got every single rank in between it. And so you just go up rank by rank by rank by rank by rank. Then you've got ELO systems, which make it so that it's like you have no clear threshold on what is X, Y, and Z. You just have the number and it increments up or down based on wins loss. And then you've got the League of Legends style, which kind of combines ELO and the tiered system before, where you'll gain points up and down, but that gain point up and down varies depending on the way that you win a match and how much you win by. And then that puts you into tiers. Whereas this, it's like, it seems like it's the kind of League of Legends version, except it doesn't communicate exactly how it works. Pretty confident we know how it works and that you have to win a certain amount of games and then you go up to the next floor. But you can go up to the next you can, as a lower skill rank, you can request games up a floor, but as a higher skilled player, you can't request games down a floor. Which I think personally is really, really good, because it means that if somebody wants to challenge themselves and put themselves in situations where they don't think they're going to win, but they might learn a lot from, they're allowed to do that. But if there's a player that wants to specifically just grind games a little bit less intensively, then they can just play around their floor level and just get games more around their skill level. I've heard that at the bottom level, it's not fantastic, and there's still the way that it ranks you initially makes it so that there's still quite a few players that are actually quite a bit better than
I'd imagine
what their rank is saying. But for the most part, I think that the system is designed quite well. Whether or not that continues to be good in the future remains to be seen. The lobby system, I just want to point out, is not connected to this. You could do this kind of system without having to have this dog shit lobby. Just want to point out.
Yeah, the tile system is quite interesting. Like, of course, divorced from the lobby system. As a tier 1, I think the first one's called System of a Down, and it goes up to what is the top one? Stairway to Heaven, I think.
Stairway to Heaven, which is Celestial.
Yeah. Can a rank 1 challenge a rank 10?
A rank 1 can challenge a rank 10, but a rank 10
can't go down.
But a rank 10 can't go down specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously
you can't bully. You can't bully lower players with lower level. Like, there was this big debate a few months ago about SBMM, which at the time I thought, like, is there a new Smash Brothers Melee update?
Yeah, I was real confused.
Skill-based matchmaking, and I think it's sort of uncontroversial that this is a good thing. Unless I'm missing something here.
So let me clarify, because I'm very in tune with the community that was having this argument, because it was the Call of Duty that primarily Call of Duty community that primarily brought up this argument, and it was kind of related to Fortnite and battle royales. Effectively, the complaint was by having skill-based matchmaking implemented permanently, you made it so that pro players weren't able to have games that made it that were like easy and comfortable to play, and they were always getting put in matches that were alongside their skill level. Their complaint about that was that it doesn't make for good content. So if you're a streamer like Myth, I think it's Myth, the TSM player for Fortnite, it's harder to get really watchable, enjoyable stream games if you are being put in a highly competitive environment all the time, because you're not able to flex as much effectively, which was the complaint from that audience, which makes sense in an environment where their primary revenue stream is off of flexing effectively. In fighting games, I don't think that applies at all. The thing that I do think is interesting is that should you be allowed to disable skill-based matchmaking if you want to make it so that you're going to fight people that are much higher level than you? And that's what I think Tekken's player matches, when you just randomly search, is really good for. If you want to play someone that's much, much better than you, but you want to do it through ranked, you kind of can't. You have to trust that the matchmaking system is going to put you with someone that is of your skill level. You can't request someone higher. By removing that skill-based matchmaking, you at least make it so that that's a possibility. It's not a very good system to do that, but it's a possibility. And so I think that the argument didn't really apply to fighting games in the same way at all, because our content is produced entirely differently. The way that we kind of view the kind of competitive space and the way that we make money is very, very different. And I don't think it was one that's particularly applicable. But it at least raised a good discussion in, is there alternative ways to do this kind of skill-based matchmaking? I think that this is a very interesting way of doing it. Whether or not it's an effective one in the long run, obviously will remain to be seen, but I at least think that it's good as an option.
I think there's a certain degree of, I was going to say, I think there's a certain degree of, in gaming in general, in modern gaming, if you load up Fortnite or something, you basically just have a big play button. You just hit that button and you play a game, and it will try and make it relative to your skill. And obviously there's like ranked and shit like that in there too. But I think there's something actually to this of just hitting a button, being in a match. That's it. And it matches you as closely as possible. So I don't hate the floor system. I don't love it either, because it just feels like you load up the floor system, you look at it, you see these 10 floors, then you have to, like, in your brain go like, oh, maybe I'm okay fighting a floor 4, whatever that means, but not floor 6. and like a 4-7's too much. Like that's just a really weird decision to make as a new player. Whereas like, you know, Street Fighter has it, and I don't particularly like Street Fighter system, but it has it where you just like play ranks, you're going to play someone that's your level. And you can go into a lobby and there'll be people of varying degrees and you can see what rank they are and go from there. I don't know whether this is something newer players are going to take advantage of effectively or like actually make use out of it. Where realistically, actually, maybe we should just funnel them straight to people that are their level, you know? Also, it just... I don't know, and it's going to sound like the corniest flex in the world, but like I played like 2 games and I was in floor 10. It was like, oh, the system's entirely irrelevant. Yeah, I know, right? I played pot, so pot they start you at like level 8. So yeah, it was just like I don't get this. Like, where do we go from here? And it's like, oh, then there's celestial floor which you can be kicked out of. It's like, all right, sure. Like I don't know. It just sometimes felt kind of redundant. And for newer players, I don't know if they're really going to get anything from it massively useful. That's kind of just how I felt.
And I also think, even though if you look at it objectively, it's quite a superficial distinction to make. But the difference between being like a grandmaster or a brawler or a destroyer or a Tekken god, and I'm a 7th floor player. It kind of rings different. It's more personal. It's more like you achieved something. It's more unique to you. I'm a warlord in Street Fighter V, as opposed to, I can hit the 11th floor. I mean, that has a unique appeal to it too. But I don't know. It just doesn't hit quite the right buttons for me.
Fair enough.
And I can see people not being. I mean, I want to ask the chat, actually. Would you have preferred a more conventional ranking-based system? Like, and you start off as, like, gear, and then you become guilty gear, and then you become the super guilty gear. Guiltier gear. Guiltiest gear. People seem to like the uniqueness of it. Yeah, it's quite unique unto itself. Yeah, why not? Why not?
I like the weirdness of it. Why not?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Perfect. All right.
To be fair, I think that, like, if you're playing a fighting game, most of the time ranked isn't realistically, like, a huge deal anyway. So whether or not the system's, like, super good or super bad, it doesn't really matter too much. Especially for Arxis games where I'd imagine that in, like, 3 months' time, we're just going to be playing in player lobbies anyway.
Probably,
like,
yeah.
That's what we do in XR. It's what they do in Fantasy Strike? Fucking hell. Grand Blue Fantasy.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, basically Fantasy Strike. It's I think it's what we do in XR in XX for the most part. The ranked is actually okay in that game. If I just want to boot up and just randomly find someone, it's not too bad. But for the most part, the culture around anime games makes it so that rank effectively doesn't mean much later down the line anyway. Yeah. So I don't think this is a huge impact. I think that it's just a nice experimentation. Definitely ups and downs, but I like the experimentation.
And I will say, go on.
I just want to quickly say that it also, like, the rank grind in Tekken, for example, is notorious for how toxic it can be. So I think this, and it can be very demotivational and demotivating. And I don't know. I think this might induce a slightly friendlier player base. Perhaps, potentially. People seem to like the uniqueness of it, and I think the idea of a hidden 11th floor is cool. I like it. Sorry, Theory, you wanted to say something?
There's a problem, I think, with Xrd and Grand Blue to a degree as well, where it can be hard not to find matches, but to know where to look for matches. So if you play Xrd, and I've had this, like, I get comments on, like, my guides about this all the time. It's like, where the fuck are the PC players? And you know what they've done is they've gone into ranked and not found anyone. Then they've gone into these, like, global lobbies and not found anyone. And then they've been told, oh, you have to go into a player lobby and then create a player lobby with, like, EU player, and then wait for people to join in the next 5 minutes. And Grand Blue has the same thing where it's like, oh, here's 200 lobbies you can join. all of them are empty apart from this French one you can join. And and a lot of the time it makes the game feel dead when you have all these like playlists where there's no one in it. But realistically, if we're trying to, and to harken back on what I said, you just want to hit a play button and get a match, you know, a lot of the time for a lot of new players. And having to like search through the labyrinth of ArcSys menus to find matches is a bit, you know, dumb.
Yeah.
There's also like, this is like a really weird thing to kind of think about, but if you think of like, oh, how do I say this in a way that's not mean? Like content creators like to make bait titles and they like to be like, I am Grandmaster fucking dude of Ryu, and people watch that shit. I personally don't care what rank you are, but people like it. And it means something to an audience that don't know what a good gauge of skill is.
Right.
Like we know who's good because we like follow them in tournaments. If they don't know that, then maybe they are going to look for like,
oh, you're a rank
pink
10.
Square.
Yeah,
exactly. And how kind of losing that with the floors being so easily accessible, you kind of lose that prestige to casual people that just don't really understand what a barometer for skill is.
Yeah. I can imagine that they might add more floors in the future. I can see that happening because it kind of felt like, a lot of people were on rank 10 or above pretty quickly. It felt like too many people. It's like the Tekken community had this issue where like not any, but a lot of players reached Tekken God Prime in the past version, and then they reset the ranks and they added Tekken God Omega in season 4 just to redistribute the skill levels just a bit. So I can see them adding more floors potentially.
Yeah. I just want to quickly ask, did Tekken, one of the problems with the floor system that I think Fury identified is like lots of people were just on floor 10. It's like lots of people reach floor 10 just quite easily. And I feel like this game, if it doesn't make it the way that it is calculating who's on what floor more clear, it's going to kind of be quite obvious that you don't necessarily have to be good to reach floor 10. You just need to invest time to reach that point.
Yeah.
And Tekken had that exact problem, which is why so many people reached that point. Because it was so easy to just grind games. It didn't matter like how much you won a game by or kind of like what the discrepancy was or like your win percentage. So long as you put the time in, you would just get to the rank. For the majority of players. Not 100% true, but for the majority of players, that was the case. And I hope that's not something that occurs with the floor system, but in the way that it's currently implemented, it kind of is the case. Like, floor 10 didn't really mean anything at the moment, and Celestial didn't mean that much either, just because it was like, you just win 5 games in a row from the way that we think it works. It's just you win 5 games in a row. Yeah, basically. Like, I'm pretty sure I've ranked up off of a floor like 6 something into Celestial. And it's like, are we real?
Oh, really?
Come on.
So it can be from any floor. I didn't actually know that. So 5.
I think it can be from any floor, because I'm pretty sure I challenged somebody that actively went into floor 10 looking for floor 10 games, and then they were on their rank was floor 6. I'm pretty sure that's how it works at the very least.
Interesting.
So yeah, if I remember correctly, that could be like a really big problem, because you could get just like people hunting down level 1s that are in the 10th floor and just grinding off of them, which would be a problem.
That would be a problem. I mean, but yeah, I just think the biggest issue is that like the floor system didn't satisfy the skill gradient for all players. So that's something that should be addressed. That's the main issue. And I think probably it will be at some point. You know, it still is a beta. But yeah, like I guess let's jump back into the core mechanics of the game. And regarding, we've talked about pretty much everything in terms of system mechanics. This is just 2 more things to address. And one is the okizeme. Now, Strive was often criticized of being oki-less, or okizeme being weakened or neutered. And how do you feel about that?
I'll let TheoryFighter go first, because I talked a lot there.
I don't massively have an issue with it. I think it's less that it's Oki-less and more of the Oki is very specific. So it's more about like what you knock down with now.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, that's always the case in Guilty Gear. There are certain moves and strings that will give you better Oki. But in this, your 2D is your Oki button. You do 2D, you run up to them, and you get something. And that is very universal. There was a couple of interesting developments in the latter half of the beta. So we were seeing Giovanna do like a reverse, what was it? It was like 236K. And that would give her a shit ton of like knockdown time to set up like really interesting Oki. And we saw it from Pot with Mega Fist, where you do that on an airborne opponent and you'd get Oki. So I'm interested to see if there's kind of like a couple more situations where Oki gets given to a character than what we're seeing right now. Because right now, I think pretty much everyone's understanding is you 2D, that's your Oki button, you run at them, and that's where you get all your cool pressure. But it might actually be a little bit more complex than our current understanding.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely as the latter half of the beta kind of came through, you started to see more okizeme options kind of open up for a lot of situations, especially when it came to like utilizing meter for Oki. There was like a just hideous Ram 4-way mix-up that I saw off of Grab with RC.
Yeah,
I was just like, fucking hell, this character's going to be gross. Because she already has really good Oki in the corner because the way that swords work and burst.
She has pretty much everything. When she has meter,
fuck.
she's just everything. She has everything. Plus way above average damage.
So I'm thinking that like okizeme over time is going to become much more prevalent. And I'm not sure how I feel about the fact that it's not as immediately understandable. To me, I think it's fine, but also I'm someone that's going to invest a lot of time into this game, even if I don't really enjoy it. I play Guilty Gear. People know that I like Guilty Gear. I like fighting games. I want to go to tournaments eventually. And if every tournament is going to be a Strive tournament, which fucking will be, it's like, I'm going to have to learn this game. And so I'm going to put hundreds of hours into it. So I'm going to understand Oki at one point. How is somebody that only really wants to put like 50 hours into it going to feel? I reckon they're probably going to feel fine, but it would depend on how much they're willing to research. Like if you're like me and you're like, I want to play Uni, but I'm not going to look up any guides, which is what I've done with Uni. It's hard to really understand how to play that game to an effective point. And I feel like Strive is also going to be like that. And Exiled wasn't as much like that. It still has that problem, and most anime games do. So I feel like it's going to get stronger over time. But is it immediately engaging to an audience that doesn't want to invest a shitload of time? Maybe not. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place in opinion there.
I felt like a core design principle that runs throughout Strive, whether you look at the Gatling system or how they've changed Oki, is intentionality. And I like that because as you mentioned, Theory, now 2D is your go-to okizeme button. And generally you have to sacrifice damage if you want to get Oki, which is cool. I think it opens up the decision space. I think Oki will develop as the game develops, and it's certainly still there. But like you have to pay a price if you want it, whether it be you have to pay 50% bar at the wall if you want the hard knockdown, or just less damage by comboing into 2D.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the point that Oki being a sacrifice is something that's quite important, especially as we kind of have seen with T7, is like if every combo kind of leads to
Oki
really high damage
and wall carry,
and Oki
all in
and
one.
war carry,
Yeah.
it's like the game can just get very fucking tedious to play, especially in a game that has quite high damage like Tekken 7, and kind of how this game's looking like it can go. It's like I would want there to be a sacrifice for like really strong Oki. So the fact that it's kind of tied to meter and the way that you knock them down is good. And I will agree with that. I think that's the only point that I'm definitely like, yes, this is good about the kind of way that they've made changes to Oki.
Yeah, I just not briefly going to Tekken. Is the newest character, Kunimitsu. They've clearly tried to give players an intentional choice between wall carry, okizeme, or damage, or even more damage, but a side turn or a change in direction. Basically, you change the way you're facing. But
side switch.
Yeah, side switch. Sorry, fluff my words there. So, and I like that. Again, it's intentionality. It means you have to, engage more actively and think about what combo you're doing and what's best for the situation at hand and your opponent and what you want to do. That's great. Adds depth. Adds meaningful choices.
Yeah.
I mean, you touched upon damage there, Leon, and I think which is something we should probably address directly. Like, what do you think about damage in Strive? Because the general consensus seems to be that it's a tad too high.
I think it's really high at the moment, and that's not inherently a problem. I think that at the level that it's at the moment is fine. My big problem comes with the power creep that might come later.
Right.
If we're to believe that buffs are greater than nerfs, which normally is the case, at what point are buffs too buff? And I very much struggle that Arxis is going to be too concerned about disappointing particular players of particular characters, and so they're going to raise everyone rather than being like, okay, this is getting absurd now, let's bring this down to normalize it with what's already there. Personally speaking, I'm someone that kind of prefers making it so that the balance is more generally in everyone's favor rather than bringing everyone else up to the strength of one character. I think that that's like, if we look at card games, for example, most card games have a history of just having absurd power creep because they wanted to make everyone feel strong as opposed to bring one particular strength down. And I feel like that is a dangerous line that fighting games can occasionally tread as well in their balance philosophy. So personally speaking, I think it's fine for now, but if we go down the line later and it comes to like characters are doing absurd shit off of almost everything, numbers will need to go down rather than bringing everyone else up to that absurd level.
Yeah. And Arxis don't really have a history of nerfing their characters, so they might have to do a rethink on that, potentially. Theory, what are your thoughts?
It's a real weird one because, with like any Guilty Gear game, it's really easy to get like a misrepresentation of damage. Maybe you see a combo on a Chipp and you're like, oh, fuck, the damage in this game's way too high. Or like a situational combo. There's a lot of like situational high damage things in Guilty Gear in general, and Strive rings true to that as well. I think the damage is a little too high because it, like, Guts wasn't a thing. Like, it felt like in that game.
Yeah.
I just didn't see Guts impacting any interaction in the game, which is kind of sad because I think Guts is a really interesting mechanic.
Yeah.
We were seeing a lot of counter hit into like 50 to 60%. Will the counter hits become less frequent? I don't know. Perhaps that is the case, that we'll see less counter hits. But if we look at games historically, damage only gets higher over time due to just people exploring the game more. When Marvel 3 came out, people were talking about how you can't kill a character. I mean, look how that game turned out. It didn't really work out that the damage was too low. I don't know if the damage is going to get substantially higher in this game because it seems the combo routes are relatively simple. But it's an absolute possibility.
Yeah.
I just don't know whether the frequency of counter hits and the frequency of like the raising of damage, which one's going to win out, because something's going to win. I just don't know what it is yet.
Just for people who are confused, Guts is a mechanic where as your health decreases, so does your defense. So attacks do less damage. And each character had a different level of Guts in previous Guilty Gears. I think Chipp actually had one of the highest guts levels in XR, and actually he's probably the character that suffers the most from this universal increase in damage, because a character like that, I mean, the game plan is just to blitz them and hope they die before you, like all or nothing. And before you needed like 3 or 4 solid knocks to take him down, but in Strive it's 2, potentially even 1 in the right conditions. He became the meme character in the end, and that, like, with a low health character, increasing damage potentially makes them unviable, which is how a lot of people felt about Chipp.
Yeah, Chipp especially had the problem in that because of the way that they changed Oki alongside it, it's like he doesn't gain as much mix-up potential. So even the knockdowns that he did get, and even though he could be very oppressive, he didn't really open up people enough to make it so that he kind of had the offset of he dies in like 2 knockdowns, but he doesn't kill off of like 4. Like he kills off of like 5 because his damage wasn't compensated to go along with it. And so I'd rather see him gain him take less damage over time rather than him gain more damage. And I'm worried that they'll go the other way in that they'll give him more damage as opposed to bringing his health up. Personally,
I think Chipp and Guts is like a really interesting combo, because if we look at Xrd, Chipp was particularly good at dealing with Guts because you put you in the air and hit you with like 40 punches, which Guts doesn't really do much to protect you from. It protects you from like bigger individual or like fewer hits with higher damage. But that just wasn't relevant at all in this game. It was, most characters would just hit you with 2 combos and you were dead, and that was it. And I think Guts actually gave Chipp like another little edge over other characters, and the fact he was so good at dealing with it. And like him losing that and that becoming a less relevant attribute for a character, I think is a bit of a sad loss, especially when Guts is still supposed to be part of this game. I mean, we have characters now that, oh God, I'm forgetting the new character's name. What's her name? Wolf Lady. Giovanna. She raises her guts when she has full meter, right? That's one of her things. But even then, it still never made a difference. He still just pop busted them twice. Like,
still dead.
It's so, if someone's designed with the idea of like their guts raising being a mechanic to them and it not making an impact on the game, there's something a bit wrong, I think.
I did notice that a lot of rounds where it's like, oh, this super should kill. I did a James Chen. Will it kill? It didn't. And so many combos, particularly supers, which should have killed, left the opponent with a slither of health. That must be some kind of invisible mechanic there.
Yeah, I noticed that quite a lot as well. I was like, this is going to kill him. And literally it was like 1 pixel. I was like, what the fuck? How did that happen? Like, did anyone... you've had it. Theory, did you have it? I mean, you're playing Potemkin. You probably just fucking...
no, everyone died.
Steamrolled everyone.
I noticed that the scaling on supers was pretty bad. So like Leo's backturn super was incredibly high damage, but if he did it from an overhead, he got barely any added damage to it. Right. So I think what they've done is made it so that supers scale late in a combo horribly.
Right.
That's my impression of what they've done. Because if you hit someone with like a raw back, like 2 raw back turned supers from Leo, they die. But you do 2 overheads into back turn super, they live, which is weird.
But I also feel that there's some kind of intentionalized magic pixel feature working in the background. It's something, because there are so many situations. Yeah, like you felt that way. I felt
that off of wall breaks a lot.
Yes,
I didn't feel it
definitely
from any other situation, but off of
wall breaks definitely. Like it's very hard to kill from a wall break.
Really felt like it should have killed. Like why is he still alive? And it's only ever a tiny amount. It's never like. It was never like, oh shit, he's got like, if this is his full bar, it's like, oh, he's got like this much left. It was always like, he's just got that like 1 hit left. Yeah. Why the fuck does that keep happening?
Yeah.
And so maybe there is like a little hidden mechanic, but it might also be like just recency bias and negativity bias taken into place where it's just like, what the fuck happened there?
But I definitely noticed it the most with wall breaks because even though Guts wasn't too noticeable in matches. Like a wall break combo when you're at full health does like 50%, 60%. But once you're down to like 30%, it will very rarely kill you. It'll leave you with that pixel. So I think there's something there.
It was odd. Maybe it's something we'll explore in the future, and it will be like you beta people just being beta people.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like, oh, there's this weird mechanic that they've decided to add.
Yeah.
Deal with it now. Like,
I'm not totally against it, but it just seems like it's something that's there.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess only a few more things to address. And Theory, you made a whole video about this. Instant faultless defense and instant guard. So I was a huge fan of this. I really enjoyed it. At least instant faultless defense. I didn't make too much use of instant guard outside of a few edge cases, a few specific moves like Mega Fist. I was really trying to instant guard that. But felt like the only thing you could do against that, really. But
he needs it. He needs it.
No, he doesn't.
No, no, he fucking doesn't. Oh my god, playing against Potemkin in this beta was a fucking nightmare.
I was actually looking forward to Potemkins over friggin' Ramlethal, though. My god. But we'll get into that later. Anyway, back to instant faultless defense and instant guard. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. So the window's been shortened by, I believe, 3 frames.
It's
so
3
it's
frames.
a lot hard.
Yeah. So was it 6 frames before? And now it's 3 frames.
I believe so. Yeah.
Pretty hard.
So it's been shortened quite a lot, and that's interesting for IB specifically because it feels like some things are balanced around the idea that you can IB it consistently. Mega Fist being a really good example of that. So Mega Fist, like not Mega Fist, Hammerfall being a good example. Hammerfall is -5, I believe.
It's safe, but you can throw it. You can throw it. That's something that changed the matchup completely for me. I was like, why is this character allowed to get in from full screen with a safe armored move, but you can throw it on reaction? And that actually changed the whole matchup for me.
You can throw on reaction. You can also instant block throw it. And the throwing it on reaction's one thing, but if you're trying to react to it, that allows pot to move in, right? It just gives you the constant fear of I need to react to this. Yeah. So being able to instant block throw it is an incredibly important thing to limit the impact of this tool because that means you can passively react to it. But it being a 3-frame window makes that incredibly hard to do.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's quite a few moves that are balanced on this idea that you IB them to get your punish. But the IB is really difficult. And I kind of question that to a certain degree. I don't know, maybe it's just going to get easier to do over time, but I kind of question how strict it is considering the reward. IFD, I think or IFB, I think is really interesting. I think is one of the coolest mechanics. It has a massive impact on strings. It costs a bit of extra meter. It's understandably a small window. It just does everything. It's kind of like this game's push block. It's like I kind of equate it to the more risky defensive mechanics, like your slashbacks, your blitzes, where it has a bigger impact on the game than is what typical for defensive mechanics. But even then, it's still pretty safe. So I'm a big fan of it. I think it completely throws open so many defensive situations, which is important in Guilty Gear. It makes Gatlings, it makes everything else interesting if the defense is interesting. I'm a big fan.
Massively agree. If I'm being totally honest, I didn't really utilize instant block or instant faultless defense that much, if I'm being totally honest, because it's a beta and I decided to play May, so I never held back. But it's definitely going to be interesting, and I'm glad that there is very, very distinct differences between the standard block and the instant block and the instant faultless defense. If those differences weren't super distinct, I feel like it would have just all been kind of there, and there wouldn't have been a clear purpose for anything until you got into specific situations. But with the distinction between all of those different types being so clear, it makes them very intentional tools that you can engage with, rather than in the previous beta, it was like, well, I guess I'll just instant block. Like it was just kind of there, and if you wanted to do it, you did. And there wasn't too many clear cases where it was like, okay, I actually want to actively do this type of block. So the only thing that I can really contribute to this conversation, because I just jumped in the air a lot, is they're good. They're very good, and it's going to be so good for the life of the game.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they're very cool. It just gave another layer to defense as well. Like, not only was I looking for when can I interrupt, when can I jump out. Well, jumping out was generally the go-to option because of how strong chicken blocking was. But I was also thinking, when can I instant IFD? When can I instant faultless defense? And it just engaged me on an entirely separate level, because it's entirely safe to try. You don't really lose anything or risk too much for attempting it. And if you're successful, well, there's a very high chance that if they're autopiloting their strings, you can get a whiff punish because the pushback is enormous. So I found it really engaging, and it's something I look forward to delving into more when the game comes out. So it's a great addition. I think we all agree on that. Do you want to talk about the soundtrack, or like?
I mean, the only thing I'll say is I hope there's instrumental versions, because I don't like listening to vocal tracks as I'm listening. I just don't like it.
I found it grating by the end of the beta, and I can't imagine listening to these vocal tracks for 10 plus years. But I'll probably do what Theory does, which I do with most fighting games: just turn the music off and play my own music eventually. So it's not that big of a that big of a loss. I think most people seem to love the soundtrack, and I just. Man, the vocals they just aged it for me, to be honest. They kind of find them slightly distracting, and
like the Guilty Gear has had a good soundtrack before, and it's still good. But often when it's like I think about what songs were really good in the soundtrack, it's mostly instrumental stuff. I'm being totally honest. Like the vocal stuff is nice to have in there as a little mix. But I don't want to hear it in the middle of a match. Just give me instrumentals. Just don't give me vocals.
I did
a lot of it felt music on, by the way.
Yeah. From what I've heard for it felt like a lot of it wasn't video game music. It was more of just like, this is a song that you would listen to. And there is an inherent quality to video game music, which is you can have it in the background. It's not grating. It loops into itself. Like, this is a quality that video game music is built on. And it doesn't feel as if Guilty Gear has that strive, where, the vocal tracks are just, they're a lot. Like, it's a lot. But I have that muted. So that doesn't bother me. Hopefully they put Birthday Train back in the game from a sign, so we can annoy people at tournaments with that. But outside of that, I don't know.
I don't necessarily mind lyrics, but I just found lyrics very awkward. Just like, this is very, very awkward.
Smell of the game is already really weird. It's like, especially when it's the what's it called, the censored version, like in the trailers, like that's bullshit blazing, bullshit gets cut, and it's like, what the fuck just happened? That sounds awful. I already find it a little bit jarring, and then to have it in the background is just bad.
Yeah. This is about as subjective as it gets, though. You can't get much more subjective than musical tastes. But I thought the compositions were pretty strong, except for that one song, which is good, but it sounds exactly like a metal version of the Beatles come together. It's Nagoriyuki's theme. It's literally the same thing. And there's that bit in Faust's theme where it just cribs No Surprises by Radiohead. Just takes it wholesale. Here it is for a few seconds. But yeah, let's any other thoughts on the system? Like anything you want to, like something that I wanted to say. I'm glad we're playing a fighting game which doesn't have an overt comeback mechanic like that. I enjoyed it.
No rage.
I like that. I can't remember the last time.
It feels like the ST equivalent of a comeback mechanic, where it's just like, you get a super, and that's how you make a comeback, which is kind of like not how we understand comeback mechanics today. But you work for your comeback, and it's obtainable by the meta game, which I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's really fun, and the game is volatile enough to allow for comebacks.
Exactly.
You can make one, which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. You need to make the comeback. The game doesn't make the comeback for you. You make the comeback, which in tech, I don't know why I keep bringing up Tekken. It's because you're here.
No, we can shit on Tekken all you like. That's what all Tekken players do. That's
in Tekken, when I'm playing as Heihachi and the game just gives me rage drive, and I'm just like, look, I'm going to throw it out because it literally wins in every single situation. The game gives me that win. And it's like, I don't want to be, even with a comeback mechanic, I don't want to be given a victory. I want to at least craft it a little bit. And this comeback mechanic should be a part that I use to make a victory. Not just, here's a fucking on block, it's like 7+, and also it's like a combo starter, and also it's a combo ender, and here's 108 damage. That's 60% of someone's life.
Yeah.
Big funny, haha, professional game, yes. Liu Kang. Yeah.
I would largely agree that rage drives, and just rage in general in Tekken, doesn't add much, and it's kind of dumb. And you made a great video about this, Leon, but I think I agree with your conclusion. And you made a great video about comeback mechanics too, Theory, about how it's about the comeback mechanic in Street Fighter Cross Tekken. But the idea that comebacks mechanics so often are just linked to here's more damage, and that is A, incredibly boring, and B, not very satisfying. There's I'm trying to look at games which do comeback mechanics well, because I don't want to say like comeback mechanic bad. It's a bit more nuanced than that. I think Killer Instinct does it very well because the comeback factor is ingrained into the character, and the characters are designed around it. Some characters are weaker at neutral and compensate by having a stronger instinct, and that opens up the design space. That's super interesting. I think Street Fighter V, now they've introduced V-Shift, which is a direct counter to some of the more oppressive mix-up-y, comeback-y V-triggers. I think Street Fighter V potentially does it well now. But most games, I think, don't.
Yeah, I think it's either... Most games have it, it's either uninteresting or it's just too oppressive. I feel like there's very few games that kind of hit the middle ground correctly. And personally, I'd rather just the system not be there most of the times, which is why I'm glad that Guilty Gear doesn't have one that's very immediate and very, very in your face. So I think,
the closest thing to a comeback mechanic I can identify in Strive, and this is a reach, is the wall break. Resetting back to neutral gives you the space to make a comeback. They are at advantage. They build meter, all this sort of stuff, but it at least gives you
a gasp there.
Yeah, and that as a comeback mechanic, if we call it one, is I think a pretty good one.
Yeah. Unless they used meat, unless they broke the wall with super, in which case you get hard. Down, but
it's definitely something. Whilst we're talking about like system mechanics, there is one thing that I don't like, and it's more like a combination of system mechanics. But if you predict someone's burst after a heavy dust, a held dust, if you predict their burst and you block it, you don't gain anything for it. It's the same as if they hit your burst. It doesn't do anything. I think that's like a point of the system where not being able to grab a burst anymore kind of makes it a little bit worse in a sense, because now burst still has counterplay, but in that specific instance, there's no difference effectively, which isn't good in my opinion.
I found bursting in general quite a bit more dangerous in Strive than in previous Guilty Gears because, well, for one thing, RCs pop you up and they put you at a higher elevation, so there's a greater risk of bursting at a higher altitude, which is of course risky. But also a lot of the combos the damage is quite front loaded, so you're incentivized to burst early, But if you burst early, there's a greater risk of you just like,
getting blown up.
Getting blown up
after. Yeah.
I saw a lot more like ill-timed bursts, and I was doing a lot more ill-timed bursts than much more frequently than I remember in Exile. And I wonder if that's a intentional design decision. I think it might be.
I think bursts are just generally less interesting and less of a compelling mechanic in this game, because in previous Guilty Gear, there was a reason you would burst late in a combo, even if you'd taken all the damage, and that was to nullify Oki. Whereas, as we established earlier, there is normally a big difference between a combo for Oki and a combo for damage. So now, as you rightly pointed out, a lot of it's front-loaded, and if it's involving an RC, you're not bursting that shit. It's going to be burst safe, and you're going to get clapped for it.
Yeah.
And then we add on top, like, it's just slow. It's quite easy to react to and RC on reaction. We were seeing people start to do that. I don't know, something about it. I can't quite put my finger on it. And I think it's more an amalgamation of everything that makes bursts feel a bit weird and a bit misplaced. But something felt a bit off to me about them.
I can agree with that.
It could be speed. It could be the lack of throwable. I don't know.
Yeah, could be many things, and it might become a non-issue later on in its lifetime. But personally, I think the burst is also a little bit less interesting.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. It felt awkward and off, and I don't know how much of that is just teething problems, but you also do bring up like very valid criticisms. That it's just there's less thought to when you apply them in the first place. So yeah. Okay, I think that about rounds it up on the system mechanics, unless there's anything really pertinent that anyone wants to bring up. That's something we missed.
I think the one thing that I think we may have a bit brushed over was the removal of AirTech.
Yeah.
That's true, actually.
Yeah, and I want to talk a bit about actually, because I found it very hard to discern between ground tech and tumbles. And I found it quite disorientating when I was trying to get up, like when I could do my DP, when I could push a button, when I could react. And I wonder if that's intentional, if they wanted to make you, when you're on the back foot taking damage, to make it feel disorientating and as if you've lost control of the match. But yeah, AirTech's gone. What are your thoughts on that?
Leon, do you want to?
I'll be totally honest. I haven't played enough. But I played quite a lot, but I feel like I haven't played enough to have like a proper attachment to them or a disattachment to them. So like realistically, this was one of the only mechanics where I wasn't comparing it to anything. I just kind of accepted it how it was and just went, which is a bit weird because it's quite core to the way that Guilty Gear works.
Because combos are shorter, I think its lack of presence didn't felt missed, basically, because combos are generally much more to the point.
Maybe. I'll just let TheoryFighter take the floor.
Yeah, go ahead. Because I mean, you clearly have something.
I may have just set myself up for an answer. Sorry about that. I actually kind of grieved the loss of AirTech a little bit. I think so. You know, when people talk about the identity of Guilty Gear, and as I said early on, it's something that is personal. But Guilty Gear is a very vertical game. And the lack of AirTeching takes out some of that verticality because you're not seeing as many situations where people tech out in the air and then you have to follow them up. And characters had an identity around forcing you into an AirTech situation and then punishing you.
Yeah.
So, you know, Axel, which obviously we're going to get to later, but was the best example of this, where he'd anti-air you from far away, you'd pop out in the air, and then you try as Axel to punish them for FDing in the air, drain their meter, or maybe you throw them. There was a big mind game about that. And, you know, characters like Dizzy didn't have a good air combo to bring you back to the ground. It felt as if every combo leading to them just hitting the ground it took away some of the interesting ways they previously balanced characters And like I said, a bit of that verticality, which is normally intrinsic to Guilty Gear. Maybe in the future, I won't care about it as much, but I think particularly for Axel, its loss felt quite big in terms of how he typically plays.
Yeah. The kind of loss that you'll feel on it is especially important to like how you view the game. Like, as someone that doesn't really think about that kind of mix-up situation too frequently, because I play a character that can send you down to the ground all the time, it's like I didn't really feel it too frequently. But if you're a character or a player that values that kind of that input that Guilty Gear allows you to have, then you're going to feel it quite strongly, which is just one of the issues of if you want to kind of dramatically shift how the game is going to play and remove and add certain things, you're going to hurt
some characters more than others.
People value. Yeah, exactly. It'd be nice if my character was in the game so I could feel it in the first place, but you know.
Hey, I think we all feel that way. Like Slayer,
is Venom.
Dizzy. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of these are all fan favorites, though, and I'm absolutely confident. You were mentioning the pile bunker earlier, and I was just like, as soon as I saw that big counter feature in Strive, I was just imagining, landing those with Slayer. But so it's a weird omission that he didn't make it, but I'm fairly confident because he is a fan favorite in Venom, of course, and Biken, of course, and potentially Testament. I don't know. Like a lot of these fan favorites might come back, probably will come back as DLC because it's money in the bank.
Yeah. It will be easy to add like the waifu characters and just milk a shitload of money. Biken's coming back, boys. For sure. I know we don't want the character back, but she's coming back.
I like Biken.
All the casuals just love
£100
her.
For sure.
Exactly.
Just £100, just milk the casuals. And, that's all that needs to happen.
Get them big old, oh God, big bucks. Oh Jesus.
I like bacon. Bacon's delicious. Great.
Bacon's.
I hate sandwiches.
I hope that if Biken does come back, she comes back a little bit reworked. Which I guess we can kind of transition into how we feel about the different characters.
Yeah.
Because obviously a lot of the characters kind of changed quite dramatically. Even character staples like Sol and Kai, they're not the Sol and Kai that we used to know. They're very, very different characters. Mei players were just, I know that on the the earlier beta, Mei players were furious. They were like, where the fuck did my character go?
Yeah, what are the moves, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone was like looking at particular characters to play, how did you feel about the kind of changes that were made to the characters that you were eyeing?
I mean, I was looking for Slayer, but he didn't make it. I mean, I tried Nagoriyuki, and he felt unfinished. The character feels like there's something missing about him. I like characters with big screen presence and big buttons and big damage, and Nagoriyuki and Slayer seem to have some overlap in that respect, but in many other respects, he just didn't work for me. I think a lot. Well, I guess we should start. Do you want to start with Nagoriyuki? I think he might be potentially the worst character in the beta, or one of the worst, one of the weakest, just because this feels like there's something missing with him. Like
he felt exploitable.
He felt very exploitable. Like I feel that Blood Rage shouldn't be just a penalty. Yeah. Because when he pops Blood Rage, well, you're just dead. I'm gonna run away to that side of the screen. You're gonna kill yourself. I feel that Blood Rage should be like a penalty, but also he should be terrifying in Blood Rage. They shouldn't restrict his mobility. He should have those teleports but make them even faster. He should be able to hunt you down, I feel, in Blood Rage. That's what I felt, Yeah.
Yeah, I also kind of agree that Nago kind of feels it just feels like he's kind of missing something, not in the... I don't think he's missing anything in neutral outside of Blood Rage. I think that he's clearly designed around the kind of exploitability. Whether or not that's balanced correctly is kind of like a different thing. But I think that that's the clear identity for the character. But once he reaches Blood Rage, it doesn't feel like anything happens. It feels like I basically have a countdown timer to when I'm going to fast slash and kill him. It's...
Yeah. Yeah,
it's just a bit underwhelming, and it feels like it kind of cuts the character too early.
exactly.
So, yeah.
I think his presence was interesting. I like the idea of the blood mechanic. It's kind of like a reverse sin food meter almost, which I thought was kind of interesting. It sometimes felt a bit gray on how, like, what direction the blood meter was going in, because it's like, oh, I hit like a far heavy slash and it's building back a bit of blood meter, but like my teleport from 2 seconds ago is raising it. It felt a bit more sort of like ambiguous compared to Sin, where it's like, this is going to cost this much food, I'm going to regain it if I eat. I actually heard quite a few people really like him, because he felt like a Hackerman sham show sort of.
It's like a Hackerman,
weird,
Abba, Slayer, bit of Sin.
Yeah.
Like, he's a big hodgepodge of characters, but still has this uniquely, his own unique identity.
And I think that's cool that they're able to put a character into the game like this, which is he just feels a bit off kilter a lot of the time, where his decision-making tree feels very small in a lot of situations. Yeah. And everything has like quite a high risk, but has good return on it as well, because he gets quite good knockdowns very frequently, and his situational damage is high. But yeah, something doesn't marry that well. And I think you're right to point out the mask off just feels underwhelming. Because the amount of matches, I'm sure you guys experienced it, where someone would go mask off and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to sit 2/3 of the screen away and just do fuck all and watch your health just like count down before I hammer fall you. And like, that's not interesting. And I think, it's got some interesting elements where you can, hit them on block with it, and then that creates sort of like crush stance, which you can then get pressure from, but it's not interesting enough. He could be tuned in a certain direction to make him interesting, but I feel.
I think the heart of the issue really lies with how Blood Rage operates, and just the fact that it's not scary at all, and he should be scary, he looks scary. And yes, it's a penalty, but it should also allow him to be a bit more explosive. And like somebody suggested that when he's in Blood Rage, maybe he should get a double jump, maybe he should get an air dash, maybe he should get all the mobility he's been lacking and be able to really get in on you. That'd be really interesting. But like, he's on a timer, he has to make it count. So yeah, that's Nagoriyuki. I mean, a character like that who is so unique onto himself, even by Guilty Gear standards, is inherently going to be hard to balance. He's either going to be too weak or too strong, and I like that they've erred on the side of caution. And
if they're gonna
bring him up,
if they're gonna make an alternative play style, I would prefer it be on the lower end of the strength spectrum. Just because it's like, if you're going to have a core philosophy inside of your game, don't make it so that the characters that are really strong just completely counteract and get rid of it. Like, that would be kind of stupid.
Exactly.
So I would like to see him be a bit better, but I also don't want him to be the top tier.
Yeah.
Speaking of the top tier,
I actually think it's I think it's Ramlethal. I think Ramlethal is kind of like on a tier onto herself. But
I disagree.
Well, let's talk about Potemkin. Let's talk about Potemkin. Because I felt like I was learning counterplay to Potemkin the more I played him. With Ramlethal, I was like, what counterplay is there to a button that takes up half the screen and leads to enormous damage on counter hit and all this pressure on block? And when she has meter, she can basically do anything really well. But let's talk about Potemkin. He's really strong. He's very strong. He's quite good. He's not bad.
Yeah. Not bad. He needs it all. Like I mentioned earlier, he gets more for 2p and 5p than anyone else in the game.
Oh yeah,
which is ridiculous. It's so hard to tell with him, because like there's a constant in fighting games. Grapplers and the big explosive grapple characters are the best when the game comes out. This is always the case.
Characters like Leo as well, those mix-up heavy explosive characters. And over time, neutral and space control tends to win out over mix-ups and big damage, as players' defense gets better. But yeah. Sorry.
Exactly. It's really hard to tell where he's going to end. I think, the 2p, 5p reward is way too high. I think he has some option selects that need to go from the game that are pretty fucked, like Pot Buster, and then you option select into an RC, and then you look if they jumped or didn't, and then you kill them. That can go pretty easily. Getting like wall bounce safe jumps is also kind of stupid. There is definitely counterplay to him that people weren't exploiting, but there's also option selects that pot players weren't exploiting. So I just don't know which one's going to win out. I think there are like I said, the things that break the game's conventions should go. But I think if people started like IFBing his 2p, that would make a huge difference to how he gets pressure and what he does on your wake up. But it's hard to tell in long term if he is going to drop off.
That's especially true that like every single grappler basically is absurd at the beginning of the game when we don't know how to properly defend against things and we don't really even know our own strengths very well. A character that can just stand in one position and go, oh shit, 40% time, it's like they're going to be quite strong for a while. I'd say probably for like the first like 2 weeks we'll probably see Potemkin like just absolutely decimate people, and then after that point we'll probably start to see him kind of slowly taper off. It's just a question of how quickly is he going to taper off, and is he going to plummet back down to the bottom like he's done in Rev 2, or is he going to do an accent core and kind of rock his way down to like about the middle? Like he's all right, he's pretty good.
I'm fairly confident after this beta he'll get a bit of a nerfing before the initial release. I'd be surprised if he wouldn't. So let's bear in mind this is a beta, right? We're not making a tier list or anything, but
or are we?
They should nerf Mega.
I do agree on that. That's the one tool that I felt like what is the counterplay to this aside from instant blocking, and even then if you instant blocking you're not guaranteed any damage. You can just put him in a throw hit mix up situation, and that's about it. On that note, maybe IB IG, I'm not sure if it's instant guard, instant block, probably should change frame data a little bit. I think that'll be interesting. But
I think it already does, doesn't it?
I don't think it does.
No.
Oh, no. Oh, okay, fair enough.
It just reduces pushback.
It's that move they could literally just add a bit of startup to it, so you throw it. You know, like
that's the change I would make. Make it slower, a bit slower. Maybe make the hitbox a bit lower as well, so you can consistently jump to air it. I felt like, how do I deal with this move is what I was thinking, and it puts him on block in the perfect range for a Potemkin Buster, which is fine. He can just jump out of it because he's quite negative at that point, but still, it just felt obnoxious in all the ways that it shouldn't have been. A few people are saying that why is Hammerfall safe? And again, we mentioned you can actually throw it, that was the big thing, the big counterplay for Potemkin that really changed how I approached that matchup, because all of a sudden, you can't just run in on me from half screen away with an armored move. So I can keep you out. I can do the grappler thing and I can lame you out much more effectively. But Potemkin super strong. Like
kind of vile.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll talk about like the characters that are quite strong at the moment that we think might kind of see a rise or a drop. So like, who else do you think was good at the moment that is probably going to end up being an entirely different character 2 or 3 months down the line?
Leo's like Leo's just by his archetype, his innate archetype. Like, you're gonna get mixed up, you're gonna get put in the blender. It's gonna be really hard to defend against him. But once people figure out that you can actually throw his dash, when so if he's being very predictable, especially with the heavy version, the run behind dash, you can throw him out of that. And as TheoryFighter suggested in his video, probably instant faultless defense is going to be quite a strong way of not neutering, but making him quite easier to defend against.
Yeah, I think Leo is not substantially worse, but considerably worse in this game compared to XZ.
Right.
because the whole thing about Leo in Guilty Gear, and the reason he was a terror, is it's not that all of his mix-ups are good. They're all pretty reactable, I would say. It's just he has a lot of them, and there's a lot of safety that comes with them. So when he's in back turn, you can react to anti-air, you can react to cross-up, you can react to dash through. But you have to react really quickly. You have to be on it. You can't really do that much about it on block. In this game, because he lost a lot of the flexibility, you know, he's no longer got wrecker strings, counter no longer beats bursts. He doesn't feel as if he's got the myriad of options, good and bad, that made him as scary as before. And he's a gatekeeper. You know, people are going to get slapped up by second wrecker cross-ups and go, oh man, this character's broken, because now he gets reward off it because of the lack of counter hit. But then when you think about it more and you actually evaluate how much risk he's putting in to get those hits, it's actually pretty high. And I think to compensate for this, they made his neutral better. His neutral buttons seem way more solid now. A lot less guessing with far H, pulling people in and maybe getting thrown. There's a lot less of that and more just like he can play a pretty fundamental game that's good and then use a bit of that random factor to make sure you don't get comfortable. And I think that's the direction Leo's going in. But yeah, people are going to get slapped up by him and hate him. And, you know, same old.
I mean,
that's what he's always been.
Yeah, basically. I think a lot of people were calling him a scrub killer, and really, like everyone at this stage, we're all scrubs, we're all beginners. So yes, he's just a killer, period, at this stage. So yeah, but if there's any character that I see is currently a menace and will probably drop off in a few months, Leo stands out more than anyone.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, who else was strong? I think. Well, I mentioned this before, Ramlethal. I think she is just, man, she's just very strong. Like, she's both very strong and very brain dead and very simple. Like, during the 3 days of the beta, like I played quite a bit the first day, and then the second day I was quite involved with wave dash and other stuff and doing projects. So I came back on the third day, or on the last day anyway. And basically, 70% of my opponents from floors 8 to 10 were all Ramlethal players. Like she was the pick. Like, if you want to win and consistently, without having to know too much and easily, she is the character. And it's very she like I made this analogy to Third Strike Chun, but she's like Third Strike Chun on crack. Like her space control is just insane. Like her standing slash just takes up a massive horizontal and vertical chunk of the screen. It's very hard to approach her. On hit, she blows you up, pushes you to the wall quite easily, especially since the stages are quite small and the wall, her pressure is insane. She gets free hits off of a throw, and throws are quite strong in this. And her aerial buttons are really good too. Like the idea is that when she loses her swords, you can rush her down, and now's your turn. But since her aerial P has such a big hitbox and it converts into combos, she can just sort of like jump around and flap for a while, and it's very hard to chase her down.
Yeah, since most characters don't have the anti-air conversions to make it so that you can really like consistently challenge that and get rewarded for it as well. It's like that button being so good without having to have swords kind of makes it very frustrating to kind of pin her down and kind of properly kill her.
Yep. So yeah, once she has meter, she can like super your projectiles on reaction. If she has full meter, she can laser you, purple RC it, and get like 1 billion mix-ups. Her reversal wake up super is probably the best in the game. Her anti-air with 6B is really good. Like when she has meter, she's just like god mode. Like she has no weaknesses in her game plan. So how do you nerf a character like that? I mean, maybe reduce the hitbox on P and her slash. Maybe just make her an absolute glass cannon. Like half her health. She crumbles in one hit. She's god mode, but she crumbles in one hit. I don't know. I thought she was obnoxious.
I feel like the only way that I could see her being nerfed in a way that was fun to play against is kind of reducing the startup on a lot of her aerial options to make it so that she's very much, you make a commitment to the ground or the air, and whether you're guessing correctly is like that's the engaging part of the game. And then the game for Ramlethal is making sure that you're covering both in ways that aren't going to put you at a massive amount of risk, which right now she can cover both at the same time without really having to lose too much for it. She's just she controls too much of the mid screen too well, without really effective counterplay. And whilst I don't think that she is like broken, I don't think she's broken at the moment. What's going to happen in a month's time could be something very fucky.
I think she's the type of character that tends to stay strong. She's like excels at space control and neutral, and those characters don't tend to fall down. And if she's this good this early, that is a bit worrying.
I think like the reward she got from Fire S was pretty nuts, considering how good of a move it was. Which is not getting that much reward from a Fire S is not the most common Guilty Gear thing in the world, but it was pretty wild how she was able to control pressure. And I completely agree with you. I think that's the sort of character archetype that gets better over time. She has a very good normals. Like there's not going to be that much counterplay to it. There's going to be movement options and you're going to understand the spacing better, but it seems really strong to me. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but she was probably one of the characters that I was disappointed with in her transition from Exer to Strive. Because I think pretty much everything that makes her
is gone.
She was a new character. Like, or might as well have been. It's a bit weird. And I definitely agree with you. It seems like she just kind of went.
She's Ramlethal now, not Ramlethal.
Not Ramlethal.
It's just a shame because I think the whole sword mechanic that she had before, she had the Duria, like these are all sick things about Ram.
She was like a Tekken homage kind of with her strings and the fact she literally had an electric. Exactly. It's a bit sad that it's gone.
And now it's just like, yep, she's character with long button and good Oki. It's like, all right, cool. And another one of these.
Yeah, she's. I felt that she, in her current state, she objectively makes the game worse because she's very strong and just not very fun to play against. I find personally. I mean, I'm not sure how you guys feel about it, but
I don't think there's many people that would argue that she's super fun to play against. I think you'd find quite a few people that don't really mind playing against her, but I don't mind playing against her is not the same as she's pretty fun to play against, which I feel like even for Potemkin can be the case sometimes. Still on that motherfucking nerfs, but
he's fun.
No. But I think that you'd find more people that make the argument that Potemkin can be fun to play against, whereas Ramlethal, the highest kind of praise you'll see playing against her is kind of, she's fine. Yeah. And I don't think that that's a positive quality in a fighting game, especially if you're going to end up losing. It shouldn't be a case of this character was fine to play against. It should have been this character is fun to play against.
Someone made an interesting suggestion, which is that swords shouldn't automatically come back. She should have to manually summon them back, and which opens her up basically, and that'd be quite fascinating. Actually, I think that would be an interesting way of changing up the character. So she
making her have
make a commitment on sword return.
Yeah.
I think automatic sword return is just not an interesting decision as a character, is it? You just super jump and just kind of sit there. It's like there's nothing interesting going on. If you had to manually call it back, even if it's just a little bit of animation, like that's at least a decision that you are making rather than just like delaying the inevitable. I guarantee people would find setups where you safely recall the swords and that gives her some weird fucky plus frames and she kills you for it. But at least it would be something interesting.
Yeah. I think we're just at the core of Ramlethal's strength is she matches the system very, very well. Like mid-range is a really important range in this game because so many of your block strings both your block strength and the opponent's leave you there, which gives Ramlethal an innate advantage because her mid-range is the best in the game. And turtling, while in the air, is very effective in this with chicken blocking and her aerial flap. So, yeah, she controls mid-range very well. And then she loses her swords for a bit, turtles a bit, dominates neutral again. Great.
Yeah, it's also the stages are smaller, so she is really easy for her to get into far S range. It's not a challenge.
Yeah. It's just a bit silly at the moment. And I don't know what they're going to do to balance her, but like I feel like most approaches that they would take to kind of solve her would just be better than the state that she's currently in. Even though I don't personally have a problem playing against her, I also play one of the characters that probably deals with her the best because I have one of the best neutral skip buttons of the game.
Oh yeah,
so it's like
dolphin.
Of course, I'm not going to have a massive problem with her. But that doesn't mean that the majority of the cast go, fuck me, this match is boring as shit. Like, and so it's like realistically, just anything to kind of change the way that she's played against in neutral would be a massive benefit to her. I don't care if she had reduced damage, I wouldn't consider that a positive because it's like the problem is that her neutral isn't engaging to engage with and so like just making it so that she has to do that more isn't the solution. So I think that she needs a shift in a place that isn't just damage numbers.
Yeah.
I agree. I think if you're seeing any character play very similar between all matchups, then that's where you can highlight that there's a bit of an issue. And for her, it was always just like, I'm going to air dash you and do jump H and it will be really hard to anti-air, or I'm going to far S you and it's going to be really hard to deal with. And you don't really want to see that in Guilty because matchups are meant to be quite important, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Okay, so I think most of us agree that Ramlethal and Potemkin are just like up there. And I'd probably put May up there as well. I think she's super strong. But interestingly, did you see the Japanese tier list? They put May in like C tier or something.
No, I didn't. Wait, which tier list is this?
Because like the Japanese tier list was really like Potemkin's at the top, and then they have like Soul or someone in third. Potemkin. I can't remember, but then they have a massive C tier which has like Axel, May, Kai, and I felt like this is a tier list that might make sense for XR because it looked like, can this character open you up? That seemed to be the biggest question. But maybe they're much better players than me, so they're probably seeing something that I'm not. I don't know.
Definitely, in my opinion, I thought Soul was very, very strong. Okay. The close S was just so hard to deal with. The run cancels out of it. The blue RC is out of it. He has the best anti-air in the game, which he should, because it's Soul. That's his character. The wild throw being really good in this game. I actually I know Leon, you said like contrary to it earlier, but I actually think Soul kind of retained a lot of who he is as a character in this game. I felt like he transitioned quite well. A lot of the sort of things with space control, gun flame, all of the sort of RC mix-ups, the corner conversions, dust loops, wild throw, these are all things that kind of kept with him. And he seems like an interesting character for it. All the god buttons are there. He seems really strong. I mean, part of that is going to be the fact that like Soul is Soul and he's the main character and people know how to play this character really quickly because the tools are really obvious. But I just found him a really hard fight against, and like just the close S frame traps were brutal for sure.
I think Justin Wong called him a Street Fighter 5 character on crack because he's just constantly in your face with plus frames, punching you, raising your risk, punching you, soul punch guy, right? And then he wild throws you and you're dead. It's yeah. I think Soul's strong, but I feel that like his mid range is good, but it's not the best, and this is a game where mid-range is super important, and I felt like he has trouble closing distance without taking big risks. He has to either go for a bandit bringer or a jump in or a shadow vortex or something, and those are all quite punishable. So I felt like he has issues closing distance in a game with some characters who are very good at controlling the neutral. But once he's in your face, he's
terrifying.
He's terrifying. Yeah.
Best grapple in the game.
Yeah. I don't think I played against many souls, and so, or at least I didn't play against enough really good ones to really notice how he was similar or different. To be completely honest, I just saw that Ground Viper was weird, and I could throw it, and I was like, "Fuck." So realistically, I just saw that and I was like, "I'm sure he's different." So yeah, how did you feel about the Kai changes, by the way? Because he seems
I was not a Kai main, to be frank. I was just looking for someone who just felt organic and easy to play, and I picked up Kai because like while I'm waiting for Slayer, like Kai felt just pretty immediate and fun, and yeah, he just felt everything I wanted to do. It was right there. Like I think he's strong because, again, I keep going on about this, but I feel mid-range is the strongest, the most important area to be good at this game, and he is good at that. He has a good projectile. His normals build up a very organic game plan when cancelled into specials. So, like, you can do S into, like, Force Edge or his Fireball, and that is a bit of a frame trap. Or if you think they're going to block, you go for the heavy version. If you think they're going to jump, use his new move, Food Arc. And yeah, like his game plan is just very easy to understand, and he's good at everything, not great at anything. He's Kai. He's like the loaf of bread. He's the white rice in this delicious exotic platter of characters, you know? The one thing that did piss me off about Kai is that it's very finicky to know whether you should combo into his Deer Eclat, or his quarter circle back / the new one.
That one. Oh yeah.
What's called the Eclair. Whether you should combo into that or into Stun Dipper, because at very specific ranges, Eclair will whiff, and you want to use Stun Dipper, but if you're too close, the second hit of Stun Dipper won't combo and you die. I just found that really finicky at times. And
it's the Kai classic, isn't it? The Stun Dipper's always kind of been that finicky move that's hard to work around for sure.
Yeah. I think if they want to keep him like an easy character, that's very approachable. Maybe just increase the range on his quarter circle back / Eclair, so it's a bit more consistent in combos. It seems like that's what they were going for. It's a combo tool. Possibly remove the ridiculous mix-ups from RC DP, because that's like a 50-50. You block a DP and now you put it in a 50-50 situation. Seems slightly insane. But yeah, he's Kai. He was pretty good. I don't understand putting him in C tier, but maybe relative to other characters, he just doesn't have anything that maybe he's too honest, right?
Yeah, I think the majority of the characters that were in C tier, like none of them were like, this character's trash. It was like, this character
isn't broken enough,
isn't as oppressive as the other characters that are in this list. So I feel like Strive in general has that kind of consistently across the board. Even like Millia, who in the beta wasn't super strong in like immediately, she still had like really oppressive stuff that she could do. It's just how frequently she got to that oppressive situation was very different to all of the other characters that you see as like, this character's really strong at the moment. She kind of needed to work towards that goal a bit harder with a bit more intentionality, which is something that might make it so that as the game goes on, she's more and more effective, which I strongly believe this character is going to get way stronger as time goes on.
Yeah, that's the nature of the character, right? He's core fundamentals. One thing, like someone asked about Dragon Install, I don't think it's that good because RC is so strong and it's so flexible that very rarely did I think that my meter was spent better on Dragon Install rather than RC. But like, yeah, and also it actually makes some of his combos less consistent. For some weird reason that they change the range on Stun Dipper. So if you do like a close range counter hit slash heavy, when he's not in Dragon Stall, you can combo into Stun Dipper. When he is in Dragon Stall, it doesn't combo. So you have to go for a weaker combo route, which seems like an oversight. But yeah, he's really strong in Dragon Stall. But I just think that since rounds go by so quickly, it's probably better just to use the RC and get more damage, guaranteed damage, or get a mix-up or something.
I thought Dragon Install was really disappointing. Like from like a I don't know what perspective. Just like the idea of Dragon Install in Soul, right? In the previous games, when he went into Dragon Install, you basically had to hide your tears from your friends around you because it was just terrifying. Horrible experience of him just running at you, covering the screen in flames, and you may be dying or maybe winning.
Yeah.
And then Kai gets it, and it's
he's
like
he's a little bit better. He's a little.
It's like Stun Edge does 2 hits now, and Stun Dipper knocks down like it has for the last 20 years. It's like brilliant. Like that's so hype. And I felt that was kind of disappointing. Yeah. Just seeing, it was like, I'm not into lore, but the people that were into lore are like, this is a big deal. And it's like, no, dude, it just gives you a hard knockdown.
The best thing he gets is like after a heavy DP, you can get a free slash DP. Great, get a bit more damage, but whatever.
Yeah, I think he gave it like a close slash combo extension or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a couple of key things to me that I felt like Kai was missing, which was, as I mentioned before, a bit of diversity in his Gatlings. And, Stun Edge, YRC or Stun Edge FRC was such a core thing in his game plan where it's like you get at long range and you FRC the fireball and you punish them for thinking it's their turn. You just don't really do that as much in this game, which I think is a little bit of a shame for his character archetype. But yeah, he seems good enough. 2S is amazing. His anti-airs are good. Can't complain.
Yeah. I wish 2H was a tad faster. I often got stuffed out when people were coming in from the air. It's a bit of a finicky thing. And yeah, he's fine. He's Kai. I mean, he's Kai.
He's just all right.
He's fine. He's just,
I think is what the character's always supposed to be. Like, he's supposed to just be a bit all right.
That's Kai. Yeah, he's a wonder bread.
It's like he didn't really get any, there was no source really, aside from the RC mix-ups off of DP.
Yeah.
But like, other than that, just Kai.
That's Kai. Yeah, and as you said, he'll probably get better as the meta develops because, Kai. But yeah, so we talked about, Soul, Kai, Nagoriyuki,
Soul, Kai, Potemkin, Nago, Leo.
We talked a bit about Chipp and why he doesn't really work earlier on, but like, guy takes too much damage.
Yeah, did any of us really play Chipp that much other than just killing him?
He was basically the crash test dummy of the beta. Like, he was there for the memes and the one-hit kills, and you use him in training mode because it made your combos look more hype. But
if you want the combo clout, you pick Chipp to fight against,
right?
Yeah. You go, whoa, look how much damage this does. And then it's like you play against any other character and it's just like, whoa, it's a normal combo. That's wild. It's it was kind of a standard.
Some people think he should get his teleport back. Sorry. I mean, I'm not sure what
teleport.
Fuck teleport, but also I'd like teleport back just to give him some sauce.
Chipp is a really hard character to balance, like incredibly difficult. He's meant to have something to do in every situation, basically. Something that, he's kind of like a Kuma in that sense, where he always has an option that you should be afraid of. Mm-hmm. And if you make those options too good, like overtune any of it, he becomes fucking annoying and just like not fun to fight against.
Yeah.
And the loss of Oki was really apparent with him. I don't know. He just, the utility on all of those options felt very limited to me. And the lack of YRC was very apparent in all of that because everything just felt like a hard commit, which is kind of shit. He's just hard committing to a bunch of stuff and then maybe losing. rather than using all of his mobility options and all of his diverse specials to constantly keep you guessing. And his character identity felt it was there, but just underwhelming, really.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think like the system changes hurt him the most out of anyone. Like as mentioned before, in a game where you universally buff damage, a character that used to die in 3 or 4 hits now dying in 2, potentially 1. It's a big difference. And yeah, like he was just underwhelming. I know many, and maybe the other factor is because people got the impression that he was underwhelming. Good players didn't use him. People barely.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, like there
might be something.
There was very few Chipp people who are like these guys are good at this game, even touched Chipp. Like hardly anyone kind of explored that character, and so maybe down the line we're going to see something else. But like I very highly doubt it. I very highly doubt anyone's going to put the time in to really find out if that's there. Like, who's going to do it? Because I'm pretty sure most of us won't.
Yeah. I got the general impression from like some of the mainstay Chipp players like Bears that he felt a bit underwhelmed by the changes, but he is, let's be honest, a character that grows over time, and the number of options will become more useful as we learn their applications. So maybe he's someone that changes, but definitely not a character you learn in 5 days, let's be honest.
For sure. Yeah. And the same could be said about definitely Zato and Millia. But like before, that's probably who we should tackle next. But before going on to Zato, Millia, Axel, May, Faust, and Giovanna, can we take a quick 15-minute break? And it's before we round off this conversation and just freshen up a bit. Of course. Yeah. All right, guys. Okay. Catch you in a little bit, and we'll be right back. We were just talking about how much we love Johnny as a character and how fun he is to play against. And
God.
Well, he is likely to come back actually, because he's popular and whatnot.
Well, fingers crossed. He dies somehow in the lore. I don't want to deal with any more Johnnies than I need to.
Enough Johnny for a lifetime. Yeah.
Do you not like him in XX either?
He's fine in XX. It's Xrd where I fucking hate fighting him.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah. That was the general consensus that I got from basically everyone. It was like, Xrd, don't want to. I think I'd rather die. But in XX, perfectly fine. In fact, to some extent, he's fun.
Yeah. It's just like Johnny players seem to try a lot harder than everyone else. It's like they all have the best execution. They all have like the best hair. They just, I don't know. They're just a different breed. I can't relate. So
fucking tryhards, what a lot of them are.
The
skill-based matchmaking, that sucks.
Yeah, you can definitely see a big overlap between Johnny players and COD players.
Hell yeah.
All right. So I guess last time we were talking about on the topic of try-hard players, we were talking about Chipp, and yeah, we said he was quite hard to use, and his full potential probably won't be seen anytime soon, even though he also seems not very well suited to the Strive system. Let's talk about the other, like, I guess, objectively harder characters in Strive, at least relative to the rest of the cast. Zato, who to me is still a mystery, really. How much of his pressure is real, how much of the mix-ups are real. And Millia. Who do you want to start with first?
I've got no experience with Zato.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about him. I played a couple, and the first couple were okay, and the last one just completely destroyed me, but I didn't know how much of that shadow pressure was real, how much of his mix-ups had cross-up protection. I mean, I just don't know, you know? And a character like that, I think it's impossible to know at this stage because he's so insanely complex.
I read a bunch of Zato threads before this because, you know, like you, I didn't really know much about the character, so I wanted to be able to do him a little bit of justice because I don't want to upset the Zato players before they come for me. So Zato's changed a lot. Eddie not taking a hit and being able to hit Zato at the same time is a massive deal. He doesn't get as much off like your average blocked normal. On top of this, his normals are worse. So he's at an interesting spot now. What they did to compensate for this was they reduced the speed, increase the speed in which Eddie comes back after you kill him. So that kind of indicates that he is more of a neutral character and that he gets less fucked when basically Eddie dies, because you know it will come back kind of soon. But his general pressure and his general Oki seems quite a bit weaker. Like everyone else, he gets most of his best mix off 2D, RC, and supers. And that mix is really good. It's certainly good. But it's very limited to those things, which feels a bit strange for Zato, because he used to just get rewarded off drill super heavily. But yeah, he feels a bit more neutral heavy. I think they're kind of terrified of making Zato too good.
Yeah.
Because he could be too good with like a little tweak here and there.
Yeah.
He's also another character that gets blown up by YRC. So YRC goes through a pose, which is kind of weird because a pose is meant to absorb everything. Maybe there'll be more tech to fight against that. I mean, you can obviously like move away from the YRC and block it and stuff like that, but he feels like he's in a weird spot where even the Zato players themselves are trying to figure out what Arxis wants them to do with this character, which is, I imagine, quite frustrating for Zato players coming into this game.
For sure.
Yeah, especially since he hasn't really changed too much he didn't change in identity too much from XX to sign an Exard. Sorry. And so like this suddenly being like a character that does not play even nearly as similar to the way that he did before must be like quite annoying. But I feel like from what I've seen, over time, like as the game's going to go on, he's going to get way stronger, or at least he will once he's got the advantage. Because right now it's like it's a beta. People are just kind of mashing, accidentally negative edging like a bunch of different moves, and so the execution's all over the place. But once people like find the rhythm and properly mash out, properly practice like the Oki setups that they've got, I reckon he'll like be a lot more clear, at least to play against, than he is right now, where it's like I don't even think the Zato knows what he's doing. Like, how am I supposed to know what he's doing? So I feel like over time, at least, he's going to get more clear to play against, and obviously he's going to get more clear to play as.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, 3 days, like it's nowhere near enough time to absorb Zato. And you know, speaking of hard to balance, he's generally been a character who's either been very, very strong or like an Exard when I think they reduced the frames, the recovery on I should say increase the recovery on drill in Exard, Rev 2, and that kind of messed the character up quite fundamentally. So he's just generally been quite hard to balance and get right. It's the nature of the character. So I just don't know. I really don't know how strong he is, honestly. But I think you bring up some good points there. He's probably a bit more neutral focused, and the system doesn't seem to favor him with YRC. But we'll see. There's too many variables, really.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about Millia? I'm assuming that you at least touched her. I'm assuming. That sounds really awful. Holy shit. I'm assuming you at least played her. Oh my god. I'm assuming you at least played her a little bit. Or at least I did.
A touch. I didn't play her that much. I played against her a few times, and most of the players weren't very good. There was one very good Millia player who I just felt like put me in the blender constantly. She feels like the one character who doesn't need blue Roman cancel to put you in the blend. And that's kind of what Millia is. But the thing with Millia is she seems very, very strong, but I don't think players could attain the level of consistency needed over, in terms of execution. Because she's a very momentum-based character. Like, she knocks you down once, she could potentially kill you from that. Like, very strong Oki, very strong mix-ups. But you escape out of that once, and that could potentially spell the end of the round for her. I mean, her health is very, very low. So, I get the feeling that she's probably a very strong character, but takes a bit of time to develop. and she's definitely harder than the other strong characters right now.
Yeah. What I think is going to be quite interesting is in the future, if there's going to be like option selects or just like things that players can do to make it so that the loss off of a wrong decision is still beneficial for Millia. If she's still able to kind of keep going off of situations that aren't necessarily her guessing the situation correctly. Because to me, it seems like the systems would, movement not being as strong in this game, specifically with the way that jumping and air dashing works, run jumping as well. To me, it seems like they would be systems that benefit her by making it so that she's able to chase people down after they've tried to struggle out a bit better. Whether or not she's able to really keep going after that like chase still remains to be seen. But I feel like she might end up being one of them characters that you escape the main mix-up, and then after that one, you've got another mix-up, and if you guess that one correctly, then you're out of the situation. Then you can turn the tables properly. But whether or not that's kind of the case is like will entirely change depending on how people are going to be using like faultless defense. Faultless, like instant faultless, IED, instant blocking, stuff like that. So I think as the defensive game kind of expands more, we're going to see more of Millia's true identity kind of start to come through, because she's always going to be good on Oki. Like that's what she does. And she's always going to kind of have some mix-ups that are a little bit hard to guess, but what is she beyond that point? And that's the point where I think she's going to get interesting in this game.
Yeah, I was surprised at how much of her identity remains after the removal of Pin. I felt like maybe if Pin goes, things are going to get a bit weird about her neutral. But I was watching Lord Knight play her a bunch, and he was still doing the same things you expect from Millia, which is moving in and out of range, using 5p and now close S for an anti-air, and baiting a lot of moves and getting a hit that way. She still felt like she had a good flow to her that allows her to experiment with ranges and get all the bait she needs to get that opening. And I think you raise a really good point. It's the layer past the initial mix-up that's important. And I think that's where we see the blue RC kind of come in, where, you do a kind of basic disc mix-up, and then you go for the close S, you jump cancel, you can bad moon, you can blue RC. And that's where the sort of complexity lies within her, because her, like, out the gate mix-ups seem pretty straightforward and pretty good. And it's how many layers that Millia can add to that. She seems really good at just like retaining pressure and keeping on you. There's a lot of flexibility with going into the target normals and just blowing you up for trying to do something to escape, which I think is really cool. I'm really happy that she still feels like Millia. Like it still is the character you always know, like always fought against, and that's good.
Yeah. She feels like one of the least changed characters in the transition from XR to Strive, which is, as you mentioned, it's surprising because Pin is so, you would have thought it's so core to her game plan, but still Millia, still does Millia things.
Yeah, and it's like I feel like they kind of done that by, even if they like kind of changed the way that some of the tools work, they made sure that like the way that the tools work still feed into the same kind of general game plan. Like she's still got the identity, even if the tools don't necessarily work the exact same way as before. So I'm really happy with her. I could easily see her becoming one of the main characters that I end up playing as time goes on. I didn't want to play her too much in the beta because I was like, this character could end up being quite complex, and I wanted to play someone that was a bit more simple. And so I think that over time she's going to be a character that is very, very interesting, and will probably be one of the characters that ends up having like a fairly low entry level requirement to play, but a very, very high ceiling and kind of complexity that she can kind of apply to you situationally with awareness.
I have no doubt she'll be a strong character. But of course, 3 days isn't enough to bring her out. Same as Zato, same as maybe Chipp. But yeah, I think Millia is for sure seems unquestionably to be like very tournament viable. Or you'll see her in a lot of tournaments. She'll be, doing her Millia thing. Okay, so on to we have Axel, May, Faust, and Giovanna.
Let's finish off on Giovanna. Let's go Axel. Let's just go in like the order that it's currently at.
Sure.
So Axel.
All right.
Anyone?
I had a lot of trouble with Axel at first, but then when I realized how strong chicken blocking was, I could just edge my way towards him. Like, yes, he does push you back a ton. If you try to approach the end, you chicken block and it sort of resets and you bring up your risk bar. And yes, it can be risky, but I felt if I alternated my approach via, dash chicken blocking and running on the floor and then finding an opportune moment to jump over like a ill-timed 2H or super jumping, I was generally not doing okay. But he slows the pace of a game down like no other character. Like you have to be very, very patient against Axel. I mean, it's Axel. It's always been like that. I'll say about time stop. I mean, of course, the memes and whatnot before beta came out, like, it looks so broken. But I think that again, RC is generally a better use of your meter because like he pops the time stop and he's put on a time limit. The time stop has a time limit before it stops. And it wouldn't make any sense if you could keep it indefinitely because you whiff and he just like, he kills you basically. But but like just the fact that there's a time limit on it, it's similar to Nagoriyuki's Blood Rage. You just turtle him a bunch and I'll just wait it out. I imagine it would be like that. It wouldn't have made any sense if you go on indefinitely. But again, like a lot of people thought he was one of the best characters, and I can see that, but similar to maybe like Potemkin, I was figuring out counterplays the more I played against him.
Yeah,
so
he's got long buttons and he covers a lot of the screen. Like he's going to be a character that is not necessarily dominant in the beta, but when you run across them, you're kind of like, shit, where the fuck do I go? But as you kind of keep playing the game more, I would imagine he's going to kind of come down quite a bit. I don't think that he's gonna like fall off the face of the earth just because the game's a bit more neutral focused,
and he's the neutral character.
So I think he's going to play into these systems a lot better, and he's going to be a bit more enjoyable to play compared to XR, especially where you had YRC that just fucking you throw a button out, you're lost. Like, so
yeah. Like fighting Axel in Xrd where all you do is this instant IAD YRC and it's like, all right, get fucked now, dude, I'm in. So good luck with that. As I kind of mentioned before, the loss of air teching and catching air tech seems like quite a big deal for him. There's just a lot less creativity on his part that can come from anti-airing. There are certain anti-air normals where he gets like he can get Axel Bomber and get a bigger reward for it. And I'm really happy they still have Axel Bomber loops. It's awesome. But it felt a lot of the time that you could just grind him to the corner. The stages are tiny, and you would just work your way forward. And sure, that built your risk gauge, but it was hard for him to open you up. Open up the actual hit he needs for that risk gauge. Wasn't impossible, but it was hard. He lost, it felt like to me, and I don't know this as a fact, that he lost a lot of his hurt boxes on his chains, because before you could do a lot more like 6Ping his, I think it's 5P and things like that to counter poke him. Didn't feel as much of a thing in this game. So some matchups, his jump S would feel quite overwhelming to deal with. But yeah, he feels kind of similar, and it feels like time stop is built to kind of fill in these gaps. So where mid-screen he would get like a 2-hit anti-air, with time stop he now gets a full combo. But like you said, doesn't necessarily pan out that way, because you could just also not jump. And that's the whole thing. he feels like Axel. I just think there's not as much creativity as I've seen in previous versions of Axel, and not enough free flowing of his sort of strings and forcing you into situations, you know, with like Ren Sen YLC and getting screen control, or even just having a DP is a massive deal that he no longer has. So there feels like a couple of things missing from him to make him as exciting as he once was. But like you said, maybe the actual just like meta and the systems behind the game benefit him more than the changes take away.
Yeah, it felt like he wasn't getting rewarded that much for anti-airs, which is you know, you could just muscle your way through eventually. You know, take the risk gauge, take a few knocks, push him to the corner. Yeah, I agree with that. And once you do push him to the corner, he doesn't have the grounded DP anymore. He has to be in the air, so it's much easier to pressure him. Now he's kind of slightly defenseless when you get near him. I think he was pretty solid. I think he'll stay solid. He was pretty strong in the beta, and again, I don't see him dropping off or anything.
Yeah, I don't reckon he'll drop off too hard. If he does, then I mean, Axel players have always kind of historically been not very high tier, and so like, I'm sure it'll just be another game where he's not very good. If that does end up being the case, but otherwise, like, still Axel. Still not going to play him because he's British. So
British.
Fuck the English. Yeah.
It's a Cockney time traveler, man. What's not to love?
Oh, fucking hell. Oi, mate, you want a Stella? Oi. Proper geezer.
If someone traveled through time to give me a Stella, I would be pretty stoked. I'm not going to lie.
I'd slap them in the face and be so thoroughly disappointed with them. Oh, my God. I'd kill the only time traveler left. Okay, look. So we can move on to like May, because I don't think the Axel, we don't really have any strong opinions on Axel either way, I would imagine.
Yeah. May, pretty damn good. Dolphins, lots of dolphins.
Pretty damn good. I especially think that she kind of, occasionally it can feel like you can't really do much to open someone up, but it doesn't matter because you're constantly on them anyway. Like the moment that you do open someone up, you've probably built up their ooh, sorry, that was a burp. Probably built up their risk gauge enough anyway, to the point where it's like, doesn't really matter. I'm still going to keep you locked down. So even if I am not necessarily winning directly by getting the hit on you, I'm winning in the sense of there's much more potential for me to make the correct decision off of this next interaction than you. I felt like she was a bit too oppressive with the Dolphins. I feel like for a game that was a bit more, a tiny bit more neutral focused, she just skipped a bit too much. The fact that I could do Dolphin at full screen, and if I get counter hit during it, it's not really that much that's going on. Was a bit suspect. Also,
she's the biggest she's had skip character in the game. It's
she also has the fuck is it called? The Dolphin into K, and then you can just Dolphin again and again and again and again and again. And she's had stuff like that before, but it's just like it's just two buttons now, and it's like there's not much complexity going on there, which isn't great. I feel like she's going to get she's already quite annoying to play against. I feel like she's just going to get more annoying over time. Which is why I might end up playing her more than I want to. So I think that she's like interesting if you didn't play May before. She's a fun character to play just because she's quite easy and quite oppressive. However, if you were a May player before, it sounds like she's a massive disappointment. It sounds like so much of the creativity that character had previously just doesn't exist anymore. And you can kind of see
damage and plus frames and dolphins and
it's just like, what do? You jump H, you dolphin, and you jump H again. Like that's what you do with this current iteration of the character.
And she has that weird vertical fast jump that's really hard to anti-air, and she can change her aerial momentum or her aerial descent as well. It's just Yeah, she's very
it's a bit weird.
obnoxious.
Yeah, it's an obnoxious character to play against. And from what I could tell, like a lot of the Mei players are just not. She's just not Mei to them anymore. And whilst to me, as someone that didn't play Mei in XR or XX, it's like, oh, it's still Mei, it's still Dolphins. It's like beyond the aesthetic. Yeah, the nuance is gone. I feel like the aesthetics for her are a lot better. That hoodie looks fire. But
she looks cool.
Sick.
Yeah.
But other than that, she doesn't seem like she's a character that really pleases a lot of the people that were already committed to the character. Yeah. So that's a bit disappointing.
They basically just like ditched a lot of her nuance and gave her damage, more like better dolphins, and a command throw, which just kills you in the corner. Which is great. Seems somewhat gutted. But what do you think, Theory?
I think I kind of agree with you. I think she's always had the sort of like, if I dolphin you and you get count hit, you fucking lose the game. And I'm glad she still has that stuff and the good jumps. Because before, her pre-jump was like really quick, so she would jump out of a lot of setups. So she retains some of that identity with a strong jump H, as you mentioned. The loss of like beach ball as a setup is a bit sad because it was such a cool tool and so interesting. And like you guys have already mentioned, I think it's basically to tune the fact that her neutral is quite strong. She is I feel like she's another gatekeepy character that over time she kind of, her potence of just being able to fucking dolphin at you over and over again kind of dissipates a little bit because you can deal with it. It's another character that quite dramatically gets affected by things like instant block. But yeah, it's hard to tell right now. Anyone like that with a clear game plan is going to just be strong 5 days in, straight up. And I do think it's a shame that she's lost a lot of what made her special with the beach ball and stuff. But, it'll be interesting to see how the meta develops around her. Also, she has a good anti-air. That's tight.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah. There we go. That's one for the books. If I can't get Venom 6P, get Maze.
It's interesting who was blessed with a good anti-air and who wasn't, and it almost seems sort of random. Like not in Soul's case, of course, he's Mr. Anti-air, but like,
it seems like everyone else was a bit like strange. How do you feel about to transition over to Faust? How do you feel about the changes to like 5K and like the fact that it doesn't really feel like it holds as much purpose as before? Because previously you'd 5K and you immediately got a combo off of it, and it covered like 2 options at once. It was insanely strong. It was this like bonkers button, but now it's just kind of there. Like, doesn't feel like you get rewarded too much off of it. Maybe it was just I was playing Faust wrong, but like every time I pushed the button, I felt like I was kind of wasting my time. Like, just didn't feel great.
It's an interesting one with Faust. Like, I agree with you. It does. 5K lost a lot of its utility. It's not as good of an anti-air anymore. It's not as good of a starter, a party starter as it once was. I think it's Lord Knight who describes Faust's button changes as every button feels like it's really specific now. It is built for X. It's built for Y. It's all very, very specific. Whereas before you had a lot of buttons that just covered a myriad of things. And that's kind of part of his identity is he just controls space so well. And that allows him, if he controls space enough, that gives him good setups for his items. And he lost a little bit of that. I'm not sure if he lost all of it as people get more accustomed to these buttons and how to use them. But he felt less like he could just dominate and space control really effectively. That wasn't as big of a concern for me anymore. I think they've done some cool stuff with him. Like, I love the Afro state. I think that's fucking awesome.
Really interesting.
It's so interesting. Like, having a state that allows for instant overheads is just so cool. His items seem good, but somewhat underwhelming in their complexity. Things like oil, things like black hole were really interesting, and not having stuff like that is, I think, a bit of a shame, where it all now feels a bit like you do a hit on them, or it just lacks a little bit of oomph that makes Faust feel like a really exciting creative character.
Yeah, like a lot of the items felt like you do a hit in a different way, which wasn't how the items before really worked. Obviously, you've still got like Donut and stuff that has different applications, but most of the items just feel like doing a hit with a different timing or a different angle now, which I don't think I like too much, especially because part of the core identity of Faust before wasn't just how does this item affect me, it's how does this item affect my opponent. But if there's more items that are just this item throws out a hitbox, you kind of lose some of that depth in the matchup that the previous items I felt kind of brought to the table. And so for me, I think Faust is a bit disappointing. Not only just in the items, but the fact that he's so specific to play. So for me personally, I think he's a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah. I found it strange how his Tasmanian Devil Spin is unsafe as well. I didn't even realize that, but yeah. I don't know.
I do love his redesign though.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Oh yeah.
Him and Zato, like when I was going through their animations and their moves, it was just like, wow, this is just black magic and witchcraft. This is incredible. How did they? I've never seen anything like it. Like, did you spend some time just looking at like just appreciating his backwalk animation or his 2H, for example? It's just.
I was gonna say that just the way that he moves is just fucking amazing. I love the redesign. I've had a couple of Faust players say they kind of miss the goofiness of the character, but as someone that just really likes decrepit corpse people with the weird sentence, I loved it. I thought it was so sick. It gave me like very like what's the vibe? It just gave off like a very like earthy, gritty, strange rawness in a game that is normally quite like goofy and wild, and here's a big fucking explosion. He felt
really
very
feels
grounded,
like an outlier, like a Joker kind of. Yeah. He was. I love his. I'm not sure if you saw his taunts as well, but they're just especially when he gives you a flower. It's just it's so well done. It's so well done.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'll be honest, I didn't play that much against Faust. He was like a few matches here and there, and I just found him slightly annoying to approach. And I didn't really have too much trouble with him, but might be a character that takes time to develop as well. Yeah.
Maybe. I feel like he's going to get stronger over time, but he's only going to get stronger like individually. In that like players are going to get better as the character, and they're going to understand more of the depth of the character. But the fact that so many of his buttons seem like they cover one option and one option only make me feel like he's going to progress slower than every other character and plateau a lot earlier in terms of like the depth that a lot of players kind of find with him. So I'm not sure he's going to be good in this game. I think he's going to be a bit one note, and there's going to be specialists, but like nobody else plays him.
Yeah, I think I agree with you in regards to his like plateau. Yeah, I think just part of fighting Faust and learning Faust is learning every item and every circumstance in which the item appears. And that's like one of the hardest things about fighting Faust is like, it's really hard to lab all the setups and all of the little instances in which Faust calls an item and what it does to the matchup. And with the lower number of items and the lower number of like status, for lack of a better word, effects they have on you, like the black hole or whatever, it's easier to fight him, just straight up easier. And if we add, the one-dimensional buttons to it, it does make me question how far he'll go. There might, let's be honest, just be some setups he has where he can just call a shit ton of items and fuck you up. That's yet to be seen. It could literally just be the case of like, this one item gives you this dumb setup, and that's really hard to deal with. And that's kind of all it takes for him to be good. But there's just less to learn when fighting against him, which I think is a big negative.
Speaking of status effects, I felt like there were more of them in Strive, like Kai's shock state. Afro State. Am I missing any? Those are the two big ones. Or is that it?
Off the top of my head, they're the only ones that are there.
Okay.
Yeah, there was more, but like at the same time, I still feel like there wasn't like a lot. It was just like these are character specific things. If there was like statuses that applied over different matchups, then I'd probably think about it a little bit more. But the fact that it was
Blood
just
Frenzy
like,
as well, that's not really a state. That's just
that's more like a stance.
Yeah.
But like if there was more statuses or like things that were shed across the board, then I'd like think about it. But to me, it's just a character trait thing.
I think those things are interesting though, because they add a new spin to a situation that you might have found yourself like a million times in the past. But now with a shock state or an afro, it's you have to approach it differently. You have to think about it differently. It's an easy way of just adding depth and more unique situations to a game.
We are seeing more of it as well in modern fighters. You know, like we're seeing, you know, the burn state in Street Fighter, the frozen state, and then obviously you have Persona 4, which has all of these incredible states that massively affect the game. It's becoming more commonplace, and I wouldn't be shocked to see more of it introduced into Guilty Gear, because giving Kai that shock state was like a little bit out of left field. It was like, all right, they've done this weird. So I wouldn't be shocked if they experiment with that more in the future.
Yeah. And speaking of states, I mean, it's not very major, but Giovanna, the last character, she also has green state, wolf state, meter state. What can we call it? She gets 5% more damage and slightly more defense.
I think green state is great because it makes it sound stupid, which it is.
Yeah. Let's call it green state. But I found this character a bit underwhelming in a lot of respects, to be honest with you. I mean, I understand that she was meant to be like a character designed for beginners, but I just found it. I think everyone says this, but she's really just punches and kicks, huh? Like the wolf is just a scarf, right? Just an accessory. I imagine it would be like Zato would be like, it should be like a puppet character or something, and but no, just punches and kicks. Just punch and kick.
Yeah, I thought she was going to be like a kind of like a summon character, but like it's just one summon, and it's like you do that thing, and depending on how you like summon
like Zappa,
it's like it does different things. Yeah, like Zappa or something.
Yeah.
But when she was just like punches and kicks and it's Cammy, I was like, I don't know if I like this, and so I didn't touch her in the beta, if I'm being honest. Like she looked cool. And I got put in some mix-ups that I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. But really, the disconnect between the aesthetic and the way that the character works kind of put me off. And I know that that's a weird fucking thing to say about a fighting game.
But I think it's completely reasonable. Like, I think you expect one thing with her when you look at her design, and then what you get is something quite different to that. While streaming Strive, I mean, TBS is mainly like a Tekken based audience, but a lot of people asking me like, who's the Paul of Strive? If I play Jin, who should I use in Strive? Like, if I don't know, but like, but when it came to Giovanna, like, she immediately reminded me of Katarina in the sense that she's designed for beginners. She's quite geared towards offense. She has sort of canned mix-ups. You press a button and she does a bunch of kicks. They're both Brazilian. There were a lot of overlaps. If you like Katarina, play Giovanna.
I thought Giovanna is an interesting, became more interesting over time to me as I saw people evolve with her. So, like you guys said, like at the start, we're like, is she a summon character? Does she? And it's like, no, she doesn't have any of that cool stuff. And then people started to go, oh, is she like Jam? Because she has like the cross up jump K. Then she has like the flip kick, which you can do out of it. And that gives her some cool mix-ups. And it's like, no, she's not Jam. That shit's really reactable. Okay, so what does this character do then? And it kind of felt like over time, the thing she was really good at was cranking your RISC meter.
Yeah, frame traps, and whiff traps next to those. Like, when do I push a button against her? It felt really oppressive.
And then she has like the dash cancelable Bs and stuff like that, which is going to lead to blue RC mix-ups. There was a lot of that sort of stuff. And her fast slash is comparable to Ram's as well, where it's really long reaching, it's hit confirmable, it's safe. There was a lot there with her, which seemed hard to tap into like from the get-go, because it was very much about movement, being in the right positioning, knowing when to dash in and hit a button. I think another thing to consider is her meter building is fucking way too fast. Like, she builds meter so quickly compared to everyone else, due to a dash rather than a run. So it opened up a lot of opportunities to extend your pressure with her and just keep cranking that risk meter until you get that one lucky hit. I think she's going to be a character that's about conditioning you into blocking and making you scared, and then going for these kind of reactable mix-ups, but getting the fucking craziest reward from it that just claps you. Which I think is a archetype that works in Guilty Gear, and we've seen it before, you know. So I'm excited to see how she evolves. I think it's really easy to be let down by like what we were presented and what we got aesthetically, because there is a mismatch, you know. Like, her wolf not being used in basically any of her moves is fucking shite. Like, it just doesn't look good. It just looks stupid. It's a massively missed opportunity for a cool character. But what is there is a really fundamental character. And if you like neutral, you're probably going to love playing her, because she has a lot of it.
I think there's a bit more to her than meets the eye, because you see it and it's just like, this button is a cross up and it is plus on block. I think you did mention that actually that a curiosity of the faultless instant faultless defense system is that if you IFD a cross up, they're actually drawn towards you, which seems like a mistake. But
yeah, I'm not sure if it's a mistake. It's a really weird coincidence. I don't know. So as you're talking about, if you cross your opponent up and they IFD the cross up, you get pulled in. And this is, from my understanding, because the direction they get pushed in is according to the offensive character rather than where the defensive character is facing. So if you cross up, often you won't turn around, so you get pulled back in. The same thing happens with Leo's cross up, his second reckon. It's really weird. I'm not sure if it's possible to capitalize that on as the offensive player, because you could just not IFD. But it does lead to better mix-ups with Geo, which is really funny. There was another couple of things with, which I mentioned like hours ago now, but she had some really good knockdown properties on her quarter forward kick, which gave massive knockdown frames, so you could jump over them and then dash back, kind of like Soul's jump S in plus R. And those sorts of things seem to lead to like really safe, jump heavy, good mix up. So
yeah, I think out of the two new characters, I initially was interested in playing Nagoriyuki, but then when seeing how you actually approach Giovanna, she looks quite fun. Like, I like the idea of just like wailing on you, looking for that one big opportunity and just like demolishing you. That's a fun way of playing a character. So yeah. And before we forget, she does have a move called Sepultura, which is amazing.
It's absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. Good job, Guilty Gear devs.
Never had a metal reference before in Guilty Gear. First one.
First time.
All right. And I guess that about brings this analysis of the Guilty Gear Strive beta to a close. Is there anything you want to bring up before we wrap things up?
One dream character for DLC. Who?
One dream character.
That's Slayer. I mean, you know, I just want to see those power bunkers.
Dream character, Halo guy, Master Chief.
Oh, hell yeah.
Put him in the game. That's it for me.
Yeah. Johnny.
If it's not Venom, I'm going to go and
find
someone and kill them. I'm just going to point that out. Someone's dying if it's not Venom. Venom doesn't come back, someone dies. He's an odd.
Look
at you, Daisuke.
And that's a great way to end it out. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This was Fighting Words 3, all about
Yes.
Guilty Gear Strive. Thanks so much, Leon and Theory, for joining me. It was an absolute pleasure.
It's suddenly gotten very dark in my room. What the hell? Oh, okay, there we go. We're back. Yes. Thank you for having me on.
Cheers all. Catch you next
Cheers.
time.